Chapter 500. Li Hongyuan's cold eyes swept over, making people feel chills all over their bodies. Fu Yunting saw that something was wrong and subconsciously stood in front of that general. After he finished, he realized that his reaction was too big, but he could only brace himself. "Wang Ye, please forgive me." Li Hongyuan was expressionless. General Fu is very protective of his subordinates, but Ben Wang is not a scourge or ferocious beast. Could it be that Ben Wang will eat him? Fu Yunting's scalp went numb. The main reason was that the psychological shadow that Jin Qinhuang gave him was too big. It simply became an instinctive reaction. "Wang Ye, please forgive me." Li Hongyuan coldly snorted. "As the commander-in-chief of an army, you are really promising." Fu Yunting's face was slightly hot. Fortunately, it was a few months of eating and sleeping in the open. His skin was already tanned and rough, so it was not very visible. Otherwise, the dignity that he had built up over the past few months would have collapsed at this moment. There was no other way. Facing anyone, he would not be like this. Right now he was just stubbornly holding on. "Okay." Li Hongyuan tapped the horsewhip in his hand with his other hand and looked at Fu Yunting meaningfully before leaving. Fu Yunting only felt his scalp go numb. Even a scourge or ferocious beast was not this terrifying. If he could, he really did not want to face Jin Qinhuang. Even if he used other methods to torment him, it was still better than this kind of face-to-face. Imperial Guard Qian stepped forward and took out the imperial edict that he carried with him, directly handing it over. Letting people kneel to receive the imperial edict and whatnot, forget it. General does not need to be so nervous. It is just official business. Wang Ye will not be angry and naturally will not do anything. But even if Wang Ye forgot about this matter, it should be General's matter. If your subordinates speak up, it will inevitably be suspected of overstepping your authority. Wang Ye is a person who follows the rules. This will also make Wang Ye question General's ability to manage the army. The living king of hell was someone who followed the rules. These words were probably only spoken by the people around him. Many thanks for the reminder. As long as it was not Li Hongyuan, Fu Yunting regained his calm. Imperial bodyguard Qian nodded, cupped his hands and left. It was only after Li Hongyuan and his entourage had all left that the people present wiped the non-existent sweat from their foreheads and breathed a sigh of relief. Jin Qinhuang's imposing manner was truly terrifying. "General, did Jin Wang Ye say anything?" Under normal circumstances, people like the army supervisor were not very well liked. Under normal circumstances, if the imperial court had enough trust, why would they send an army supervisor? Moreover, there were some supervisors who came down to snatch the credit. Just this alone, for the sake of the overall situation, it wasn't that they couldn't tolerate it. However, they were afraid that these people would recklessly interfere with the military affairs. They clearly didn't understand, and yet they still blindly gave orders. This would lead to immeasurable tragic consequences. Knowing that there would be no problem with the imperial edict, Fu Yunting still looked at it symbolically. "I know what you are worried about. Don't worry, what you are thinking will not happen. If that's the case, you're naturally the best. But what's the purpose of this bodhisattva?" In fact, Fu Yunting also wanted to know why Li Hongyuan was here. Was it because he wasn't at ease with this war, so he came to personally take a look? However, no matter what, according to Jin Qinhuang's ability, the advantages of the war far outweighed the disadvantages. The so-called disadvantages, Fu Yunting was a little embarrassed and felt that it was probably concentrated on him. Therefore, no matter what, this mentality must be adjusted well and absolutely couldn't be removed because of his own reasons. "General, then do you want to hold a welcoming banquet for Wang Ye?" Another old general asked. "There's no need for a welcoming banquet. Not to mention the tension of the war, it's Wang Ye's first time here. I'm afraid many things are not to his taste." Fu Yunting said it tactfully. Those who didn't know deeply agreed, and those who knew rubbed their nose and didn't say anything. With Jin Qinhuang's degree of extravagance and pickiness, they really couldn't afford it here. They didn't want to spend so much effort to hold a banquet, but in the end they left on bad terms. When Li Hongyuan returned to the city, Jingwan had already woken up from her nap. Her spirit had more or less recovered. For the time being, the city hadn't been affected by the war. But after all, it was the northwest border. Naturally, it couldn't be compared to the capital and Jiangnan's prosperity, but it still had its own local characteristics. The buildings were relatively cold and hard, and the color scheme leaned towards the cold. However, because it was prepared for the Qinhuang to live in, it was still well prepared. The people in the residence might not be very polite, but they abided by the rules and had a sense of propriety. Jingwan wasn't unaccustomed to it. As for Li Hongyuan, in fact, he wasn't extravagant on normal days. When it was necessary, he could adapt to any environment. It was just that after seeing the layout of the residence, he was still very dissatisfied. He doubted that bringing his wife to the northwest was it wrong? Or should he have brought more things like when he went to Jiangnan? But this was just a thought. If he really did it, Wan would be hated by who knows how many people. But when he saw that Jingwan was adapting well, Li Hongyuan's brows slightly relaxed. Jingwan chuckled and stretched out her finger to rub Li Hongyuan's eyebrows. "I'm fine." Li Hongyuan also laughed. Yes, how could he forget that his wife wouldn't be easily bought over by external things? The reason why she calmly accepted everything he gave was because she first accepted him from the bottom of her heart. The only thing that could buy her was never external things but sincerity. "You went to the barracks to take a look. How is the situation?" It didn't meet expectations, but it didn't disappoint too much. Fu Yunting is still lacking after all. I just need to train him again. His tone was faint, but his eyes were looking at her. Jingwan almost laughed, but in the end she held back. If she laughed, she didn't know what this man would do. However, she and Fu Yunting didn't even have a face-to-face photo. Did he have to be like this? Jingwan really wanted to say, "You're just looking for trouble if you keep bringing up your past life." Alright, she couldn't say that. Yes, it's his honor to be trained by A Yuan personally. Li Hongyuan's eyes were cold. He reached out and pinched Jingwan's face. "Don't think that I don't know what you're thinking. But I'm too lazy to argue with you now. Just wait, I'll record it down one by one. We'll slowly settle it when we return to the capital." Jingwan rolled her eyes at him. This narrow-minded man. Li Hongyuan took Jingwan to walk around the garden. There wasn't much to admire, so the topic naturally turned to the situation in the northwest. Jingwan asked the question in her heart. "A Yuan, in your previous life the Qi Yuan suffered heavy losses. According to the fierceness of the Xiongnu, they should have directly attacked the Qi Yuan. However, from what I've heard, the Qi Yuan is in trouble and the Xiongnu have directly withdrawn their troops? I told you the same thing. There's an internal problem in the western Xiongnu. The virtuous king's power is getting stronger and stronger, and some people have the idea of plucking the fruits of their labor. In addition, this winter there's a rare heavy snow in the north. The area near the Qi Yuan is quite serious, not to mention the areas further north. The nomadic people's main property is cattle, sheep and other livestock. A large number of people have died, so in order to survive, they naturally have to plunder. The former Wei and the Xiongnu are all disaster areas, so the Xiongnu don't have much energy to invest in the Qi Yuan. Moreover, the Xiongnu themselves are not a rich land. To be able to fight against the Qi Yuan for a year, their reserves are almost depleted. Even the cleverest housewife can't cook without rice. Jingwan understood. In other words, the Xiongnu did not have the right time, place and people. They had no choice but to retreat when they had such a great opportunity. She wondered if the virtuous king was so angry that he vomited blood. Therefore, although the Qi Yuan could be said to be besieged on all sides, it had a lot of luck. This had created favorable conditions for someone to establish a more powerful dynasty in the future. And now he had the advantage of foresight in certain aspects. If there were no accidents, the Qi Yuan in his hands in the future would be more powerful and prosperous than the one in his previous life. Jingwan did not have much ambition, but when she thought about such a prosperous era, which was created by her husband, she could not help but feel excited and proud. If we eliminate the virtuous king now, won't it be easier to deal with the Xiongnu in the future? Of course, but there are many things that cannot be generalized. After all, without the virtuous king, the internal conflicts among the Xiongnu would be reduced. If the Xiongnu retreated early to recuperate, then they would be able to preserve some of their accumulation. When they attack again in the future, they would be united as one. Hearing this, Jingwan was not nervous. She believed that he had a follow-up plan. So, not only do we have to eliminate the virtuous king, we have to completely destroy the Xiongnu just like the northern Xiongnu in the past. You have to know that the northern Xiongnu and the western Xiongnu were rivals in the past. Because of the battle with the Qi Yuan, the northern Xiongnu were far inferior to the western Xiongnu until today. Not to mention, during this period of time, the western Xiongnu had plundered a large amount of territory. Destroy them to the point that Destroy them to the point that they will be exterminated. Jingwan finished his sentence. Li Hongyuan turned to look at Jingwan and smiled. Wanwan, you are quite ambitious. Jingwan turned to look at him. What was he talking about? It was obviously this bastard who had led her to say this. Li Hongyuan held her hand, their fingers intertwined, and continued walking at a moderate pace. If the Xiongnu are completely defeated, the one on the throne will not have the chance to find trouble with Fu Yunting openly. Even if the emperor has great achievements, he will not dare to act recklessly against such a meritorious official. If that's the case, according to the Su family's plan, the emperor will be even more restless. Others will not do anything to him, but he will be worried to death. What does that have to do with us? Li Hongyuan was unusually calm. To be honest, the more worried Lu Qingdi was, the happier he would be. Therefore, Lu Qingdi was a failure as a husband, a failure as a father, and an even greater failure as an emperor. We can only take this matter slowly. But how should we deal with the imperial noble consort? Is it really because of the war? Whether it is or not, we will know when we go to the spell altar tomorrow. How far is the nearest spell altar? It is less than 100 miles away from this city. It is the only spell altar in the 5 counties inside and outside Heaven's Gate. There are 80 places with good feng shui. Is the northwest such a small proportion of the land? It is not strange. Throughout history, after many dynasties, how many have built a capital city in this area? Well, in the past history of Qiyuan there was no such thing. Moreover, a capital city was very important to a country. If it was to be built, it really needed to be considered in all aspects. Shall I ask someone to prepare it? No, I will go there. Anyway, it is a secret. If you are here, won't you be able to cover for me better? Jingwan raised her eyebrows. She suspected that he was up to no good. Don't worry. I will go there early tomorrow morning. I will be back tomorrow. Jingwan really had nothing to worry about. There you go. I will also take the opportunity to understand the situation in the city and see if there is anything I can help with. She could not only help. Li Hongyuan thought of his previous life. Because of his situation at that time, he did not know what Jingwan did. But later on, he learned that Fu Yunting could hold on for more than a year under the situation of internal and external troubles. How much credit did Jingwan have for Jingwan? It was the same her. Although she appeared here in a different way, he believed that what she would do in the future would be the same. Moreover, now that her status was different, her words would be carried out more vigorously in the beginning. In this way, the princess consort would definitely do better than the general's wife. However, in reality, would it really be like this? Jingwan had personally asked for the provisions and personally escorted them. She had already gained support with her own abilities. In addition, Fu Yunting had gained the respect of the soldiers and citizens of the Northwest. Whatever Jingwan wanted to do, many people would unconditionally believe her. How could her words not be carried out? On the contrary, the current princess consort in these people's impression was that she did not know pain and suffering. She only knew how to enjoy life and did not know anything. She was a noble lady who needed people to serve her. 9 out of 10 of her words would be doubted. So, the princess consort was the general's wife? Haha, let's not talk about the end. In the beginning it was definitely impossible. How could Li Hongyuan not know this? Wrong, it was because he knew it very clearly. So he was being petty. Jingwan didn't know what he was thinking. She was still telling him what she could do to help. The more Li Hongyuan listened, the darker his face became. According to Jingwan's words, she would probably be busier than him. The time they spent together would be infinitely reduced. Your husband brought you here to play. Suddenly hearing Li Hongyuan's cold and harsh words, Jingwan was stunned. Then she did not know whether to laugh or cry. Ah Yuan, don't make a fuss. What time is it now? Are you really bringing me here to play? Actually, you know best in your heart. So at this point, don't make a fuss. Hearing Jingwan's last adjective, Li Hongyuan's face became even darker. However, it was undeniable that Jingwan was right. The living Hell King was in a bad mood and did not want to continue walking. He pulled his wife back to rest. After all, for a long time after this, he was afraid that he would not be able to eat his fill. Jingwan was severely tormented, but the next day she still woke up full of energy. However, Li Hongyuan had already left. Jingwan's morning exercise was not cancelled. On the contrary, it was increased to a certain extent. Moreover, it was not only physical exercise but also hand crossbows and arrows. Although she did not see the cruelty of the battlefield and probably would not see it, but as it neared she could not help but feel a sense of danger. When Jingwan heard it she was already sweating profusely. Even in the summer Jingwan rarely sweated so much. However, everyone saw Jingwan's efforts. Granny Gong also consciously taught Jingwan some boxing skills. Jingwan herself might not know, but the secret guards hiding in the dark knew very well. Those were the killing moves that were more skillful. They did not require too much strength and were not harmful to the body. Most people might find it difficult to learn, but Jingwan's body was very flexible and balanced because she had been training since she was a child. Therefore it was very easy for her to learn. Those who knew Granny Gong's identity looked at each other. Was it really okay for the Lady Protector to do this? In fact, unless they were all dead, how could the princess consort fight with others personally? But would there be a day when they were all dead? What a joke. If someone could kill them all with such a group of sneaky soldiers, not to mention that the capital would be pierced into a sieve, at least there would be an assassination case from time to time. It was not easy to kill them in the capital. There were many governors in all the counties. So, the Lady Protector was teaching the princess consort so that she could fight with the prince? Alright, she had accidentally exposed herself. She had better stop quickly. If she accidentally revealed her emotions, wouldn't she be courting death? Jingwan washed up and had breakfast. Then she put on a set of clean clothes and went out with her men. Speaking of which, although she did not wear a fancy dress or exquisite hair accessories tonight, the material of her clothes was very different from the clothes of the people in the northwest. Therefore she attracted a lot of attention when she went out on the street. However, the customs here were quite good. Most people just took a look and then left. They did not cause unnecessary trouble. Besides, they could more or less guess that Jingwan's identity was not simple. Although there were not many people around Jingwan, there were still some unfamiliar figures around her. When the two countries were at war as a border town, they were very sensitive to unfamiliar faces. Therefore, even though many people were wearing the local clothes and mingling with the crowd to protect Jingwan, they did not achieve their real goal. This was probably something that Imperial bodyguard Qian and the others did not expect. However, they were different. After going through special training, they were able to see through other people's eyes. Therefore, after a while they would definitely notice something. Therefore, this mistake would not last long. However, Jingwan was upright and magnanimous. No matter what she did, if she had doubts she would ask. If she did not understand she would ask. If she inadvertently offended someone she would apologize very straightforwardly. This kind of attitude would not cause others to be dissatisfied. Speaking of which, because the purpose of Jin Qinhuang's visit was unclear and they did not know where to start, many people were actually staring at Jingwan. Of course, this kind of thing could not be done by a man. Wouldn't that be offending Jin Qinhuang to death? Don't forget, this was originally a prefectural city. The number of officials here was not small. These officials all had family members. Because of the war, civil officials were also used as facial features. They did not have to go to the battlefield. Their feet did not touch the ground all day long. They even had frequent contact with soldiers. Their bodies were even infected with some of the habits of the military. Following that, the people in their families were also affected. What's more, in the northwest, the customs were originally relatively open. Especially for women, the restrictions were much weaker. Compared to being a housewife, some of them were able to wield the whip with vigor and vigor. Perhaps because they knew the worries of the elders in their families, they were also worried about the soldiers. Therefore, some of the young ladies volunteered to go and check out the situation. Jingwan going out at this time was a good opportunity for them. It was just that they did not show up at the beginning and only watched from afar. Because the unfamiliar faces in the crowd were also centered around Jingwan, they did not call the city guards. However, this kind of situation actually had a certain drawback. Because during this time they could be used by others. The people in the city might not know how many people were around Jingwan, and the people around Jingwan were all strangers. Therefore, those who wanted to take advantage of the situation could take advantage of this loophole. Therefore, it was best for both sides to meet face to face and clearly identify each other. However, it was not suitable for some secret guards to show up in front of others. Nanny Gong whispered to Jingwan about this matter. Jingwan frowned slightly. In this case, it was best for her to go to a crowded place. Sometimes, a spy could be an unimaginable threat. Therefore, Jingwan was quite decisive about this matter. It did not matter if she did not show up. After all, she was not really here to have fun. However, she felt that she had to do something step by step. If she suddenly broke into a place where she should not break into, she would probably not be liked, be guarded against, and be regarded as enemies. More importantly, she would cause trouble for others. Therefore, it was quite troublesome to tell Jingwan where to go next. Since your highness wants to see the condition of those wounded soldiers, you can go directly to the person in charge. Jingwan thought for a while. This was indeed the best way. In fact, it was very necessary to have a good relationship with the person in charge if she wanted to intervene in a matter without causing any trouble. Because the people trained by Prince Jin were quite capable and had already sent people over, Jingwan actually remembered the layout of the entire prefectural city. She did not need anyone to lead the way at all and could find the way by herself. Probably because they saw that Jingwan was too purposeful, the people who were watching from afar could not sit still any longer and immediately caught up with her. Naturally, the existence of these people could not escape the eyes of Nanny Gong and the others. Therefore, Jingwan was not at all surprised that they were blocked. Instead, she smiled and said, "I thought you girls were not going to show up." The moment she spoke, the other party was a little embarrassed. "Your Highness, have you noticed us long ago? You girls are traveling together. In this city it should be quite obvious. Coupled with the attitude of the people around you, you have been following me for a long time. If you still can't find out, not to mention other things, the guards who followed me will be punished when they return." In the end, they were still young girls. Even if they were affected by the war and by their families, perhaps they knew more things, but in the end they had not experienced the wind, frost, snow and rain. They were still innocent and naive. They thought that they hid it well and let them come out. Their families did not have any hope at all. Perhaps it was more to express a kind of attitude. It turned out that they had been discovered long ago. Then why were they still sneaking around? They should have come out earlier. "Your Highness, where do you plan to go? We can lead the way. Don't you already know? Are you sure you want to lead the way for me?" Jingwan asked with a faint smile. The place where the wounded soldiers were placed was obviously not a good place. There could be death at any time, and it was always filled with the smell of blood and medicine. It would definitely be very unpleasant when mixed together. Moreover, there were endless painful groans. In short, there was only grief and despair. Everyone would feel depressed. Good people would definitely be affected by negative emotions after entering. The families of these girls probably forbade them to set foot in such a place. In fact, they were indeed hesitating. It was not only because of the warning of their families, but also because they had secretly gone there. It was too uncomfortable to stay in that place. Not long after, they felt suffocated. So, to be honest, they really did not want to go. However, this Qin Wang Fei from the capital was much more delicate than them. Moreover, she probably wouldn't be able to stand that kind of place. Perhaps she would just stand at the border for a while before turning around and leaving. They might even be able to show off their superiority in front of this Qin Wang Fei. "If your Highness wants to go, we can lead the way. But is your Highness sure you want to go?" Were they being checkmated? Jingwan's core and shell did not match after all. She was quite tolerant of these girls. "We'll go." "Then your Highness, please." Perhaps because of Jingwan's good attitude, they could not help but soften their attitude. "Then if your Highness feels uncomfortable, you can tell us directly. Don't force yourself. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." Since this was the case, no one said anything more. Perhaps because the place they were going to was special, no one joked. The wounded soldiers were placed on the other side of the prefectural city. They had vacated an area. In essence, they were still choosing the location from the slums. This was also a subconscious choice made by those in power. If it was anyone else, there would be no exception. And the commoners who were let out would not feel that it was inappropriate. In this way, it was better to take a carriage to save time and energy. The closer they got, the fewer people they could see. And the atmosphere seemed to have already spread. Could be felt from afar. Jingwan asked someone to stop the carriage in advance. She got off the carriage and led the people step by step towards the place. This place must be guarded. Thus, before Jingwan and the others could get close, they were already blocked outside. In this place they could already see some of the situation inside. Especially the smell, it was exceptionally unpleasant. Jingwan endured and did not use a handkerchief to cover her nose and mouth. Not to mention other things, just based on the smell, Jingwan could conclude that the hygiene inside must be terrible. Imperial Guard Qian stepped forward and took out the waist token of Jin Qin Wang Fu to show his identity. The guards looked at each other in dismay. It must be known that not everyone knew that there would be an army supervisor in the northwest, and that it was a prince. Thus, when they suddenly knew the identity of Jingwan and the others, they were extremely surprised. It must be known that the trip to Jiangnan last year was deliberately publicized by some people. Thus, when Li Hongyuan arrived at a certain place, there were many people who knew about it. However, the common people still did not know. And this time, because of the terrifying reputation of the King of Hell, the insiders wanted to weaken Jin Qinhuang's presence. It was normal that the common soldiers did not know. However, Jingwan did not intend to barge in from the beginning. She only said that she wanted to see the person in charge. These guards naturally did not dare to neglect. A prince of the imperial court, that was a high official. They left quickly, but the people who came out to greet them were also quite fast. It was a middle-aged man and an old man. Perhaps because they were old, the way they walked was still vigorous. Jingwan could not help but take a few more glances. The two people walked in front of Jingwan and stopped when they were a few steps away. Although they were puzzled as to why a Qinhuang Fei would come to this place, they still had to follow the rules. It was just that compared to the middle-aged man's restraint, the old man seemed to be very enthusiastic towards Jingwan and her party. Jingwan and the others quickly knew the reason. It turned out that this old man was actually the military doctor of the Northeast Army. It was the old doctor who had gone to the capital with He Jinwei's family. The old doctor was nominally a military doctor, but he did not have a military status. Thus, in the Northeast there might not be any battles for a long time. And when the Northwest was short of manpower, he brought a portion of people and came to help. Dare I ask Wang Fei Yang, did the Wang Fu's doctor who made the special medicine come? The special medicine was not the kind that had amazing effects but would also magnify the pain countless times. That kind of medicine, in the beginning, was essentially used for interrogation. However, if the side effects could be removed, it was definitely the best medicine to use as an ordinary medicine. Gong Jio was influenced by his master to be a doctor of the same profession, especially one who focused on saving lives, so he was usually more respectful. Greetings to the old doctor. Gong Jio automatically stepped forward. The old doctor was probably surprised by his young age, so his eyes widened slightly. However, now was not the time to be calculative. He stepped forward and directly grabbed Gong Jio. To be able to make such a medicine at such a young age, you must be very knowledgeable about medicine. Come, I need your help. Gong Jio wasn't just a doctor. He was a secret guard. Even if he was good at medicine, his martial arts weren't weak either. It was impossible for an old man to drag him away. He had a master. If his master didn't say anything, how could he leave just like that? Jingwan saw this and said, Gong Jio, you go. Yes. Jingwan looked at the middle-aged man. He was probably the real person in charge. I want to go in and take a look. I wonder if you will allow me to? Seeing that Jingwan was still polite, the slightly stiff body of the person in charge relaxed a little. They were just small fries. In the face of these nobles, they could only serve them respectfully. If they wanted to go in, they could just barge in and there was nothing they could do. They also had to be prepared for the situation inside to be too bad and cause the nobles to feel uncomfortable. If the situation was light, they would probably just be scolded. If the situation was serious, they might even lose their lives. He was really lucky to be able to meet such a person who asked for their help. Since Princess Consort has asked, then this little one will say something. The situation inside is very bad. Princess Consort is a noble person and I am afraid it will make you uncomfortable. If Princess Consort does not have a reason to go in, this little one does not recommend Princess Consort to go in. From the smell you can roughly imagine the situation. However, since you are already standing here, your purpose must be to come here. Therefore, it is not very likely that you will leave without taking a look. If it causes you any trouble, please forgive me. Princess Consort, you are too serious. I don't deserve it. There is nothing to deserve it. After all, I did cause you trouble. The girls behind her looked at each other and saw the disbelief in each other's eyes. This Princess Consort didn't put on airs at all. She didn't look like a Princess Consort at all. As the saying goes, a higher official can crush people to death. Any small official, if it were their family members, would also be arrogant. Not to mention other things, compared with their attitude when they came here before and compared with this Princess Consort, they were inexplicably ashamed because they seemed to be too rude. Although it was uncomfortable, they still followed Jingwan in. Jingwan did not speak along the way and just watched quietly. Not to mention disturbing others, she even took the initiative to avoid people when she saw people carrying people over. The older they got, the deeper they went. Even the guards of the prince's mansion might not have seen a dead person before. This kind of environment had a certain influence on them, let alone the girls. On the other hand, Jingwan seemed to be getting calmer as she walked. However, her originally relaxed expression became colder and colder. Sometimes she even went into the room to take a look. When she came out, she saw the girls covered their mouths and resisted the urge to vomit. "You don't feel well, go back." However, they were stubborn and shook their heads, unwilling to go back. Jingwan's expression became colder. "If you vomit, you will cause trouble for others. They are very busy and tired, do you understand?" They were stunned. They probably did not expect Jingwan's attitude to change so much. "Princess consort, we will definitely endure it." "Then do as you like." After turning a small part of the room, Jingwan saw Gongjiu. At this moment he was stitching up someone's wound. His movements were very skillful. Jingwan was a little stunned for a moment. When the stitching was done, he applied a light yellow liquid. Gongjiu cleaned his hands and walked over. "Princess consort." Jingwan nodded. "Have you been studying wound stitching?" "Yes, because it is indeed very effective. Not to mention other places, it should be very useful on the battlefield." "I saw that the thread you used was not prepared at the last minute. Did you bring it from the capital? Have you almost mastered this set of skills?" "I used the catgut suture that you mentioned. Because Prince Yu had instructed me to do so, I have been studying and organizing it." Jingwan felt that in her husband's previous life, she should have brought up the topic of wound stitching, but she did not know if it was accepted. If it was accepted, then it would definitely be popularized. Her husband had personally led the army for many years, so it was impossible for him not to know about it. Then he should have prepared for it long ago. From the time he was conferred the title of prince, he should have made preparations in this regard. However, Gongjiu first learned about it from her. So it was still not popularized. "I thought that it would not be accepted. To sew a wound as if it was a piece of cloth, it must be absurd and ridiculous to those who did not know." "Why do you say so, princess consort? Compared to losing one's life, sewing a wound is really not worth mentioning. I heard from Gongjiu that this method was first proposed by you, princess consort. Gongjiu has also confirmed that it is very effective. It is a great blessing for the soldiers." "Thank you, princess consort," the old doctor said and bowed deeply to Jingwan. Jingwan quickly avoided it. "Doctor, you're too kind. I just suddenly thought of it." The rest was done by Gongjiu. "If I really want to thank someone, I should thank him." "Princess consort, you are wrong. Many things are wrong. In fact, it is just an idea. So, princess consort, you don't have to be modest." Gongjiu said. "That's right." The old doctor agreed. "Let's not talk about this. Actually, I have an idea and want to say it. I wonder." "Go ahead, princess consort," the old doctor said immediately. Someone who could come up with a wonderful idea now might have an idea that was very useful. "Actually, I think that the environment here is a little too bad. These soldiers are already suffering from illness. If the environment is too bad, even a healthy person would feel uncomfortable, let alone them. When they feel uncomfortable, their willpower will definitely be depressed. As the saying goes, accumulated worry will lead to illness. If their willpower is depressed, it will definitely have a great impact. Besides, I have also studied some medical books. Especially the more special diseases such as the plague, are most likely related to the bad environment." The moment these words were said, it caused quite a commotion. https://11/11807/128414440. Chapter 501. Don't be nervous. Let me finish. There was no other way. These people wouldn't understand even if she told them about germs. Jingwan could only make up some nonsense. Of course, even if it was nonsense, it had to be within a reasonable range. It had to be enough to convince people and not just speak without thinking. As everyone knows, cleaning up the battlefield after a war and burying the bodies of the soldiers is not only to bury the loyal soldiers, but also to burn the enemy soldiers. The purpose is the same. Also, whether it's an earthquake or a flood, it has to be dealt with after a natural disaster. If it's not dealt with, people might get infected. If they get infected, they might pass the disease to others. It's clear that not only the dead carry the pathogen. Similarly, a clean place is not only more comfortable, It's also less easy to get sick. So, whether it's for the sake of the soldiers or the people taking care of them, a clean place is very necessary. The reason was actually very simple. It's just that people didn't notice it. Once it was pointed out, it wasn't that hard to accept. Especially as a doctor, he should have a deeper experience in this aspect. So, after Jingwan finished speaking, many people fell into deep thought. Princess's words are reasonable. It's just that we have limited manpower. It's a little better if there's no war. Once there's a war, one person can't wait to be split into several people. Why don't we ask the commoners for help? Not to mention other things, just provide daily food. I believe that many people will be willing. More than one person smiled bitterly. The old doctor opened his mouth and said, Princess, you don't know. The food that is distributed to us is only a small portion of the food given to the soldiers who are neither injured nor sick. For people like us, because we don't have a military status, we don't even get any food. We have to take care of our own food. After all, we have to make sure that the other soldiers are full and have enough strength to fight. It's not that we haven't thought of asking the commoners for help, but we don't have enough strength. The food shortage is to this extent? Jingwan frowned. From what she knew, it shouldn't be like this. It doesn't matter if there's enough food or not. It's the usual practice. If there's not enough food, perhaps not even a ration will be given. After all, these people are already... Jingwan naturally understood what he was trying to say. Anger appeared on her face. How dare you? They fought with their lives in order to protect the people and defend the territory. Since they were injured, they should be taken better care of. Wouldn't such a method be chilling? Who would still fight with all their might? Jingwan knew that many disabled soldiers did not receive any compensation when they returned home. They were seen as burdens by their families and led miserable lives. No one remembered their contributions and sacrifices. At the same time, they also knew that this would be the end result. Therefore, they had some misgivings on the battlefield. They would either protect themselves or simply die. If one was injured and did not receive proper care, a light injury could turn into a serious injury. A serious injury was basically equivalent to a disability. That was why the casualty rate on the battlefield was so high. Everyone understood this principle and some people were willing to do something. However, they could not do it rashly because it would be taboo to the people in power. As for those in power, there were many things they had to consider. Even if they were to do something, they might not necessarily be able to do it. The most typical example was when an emperor rewarded a commoner with a golden bowl for something. When it reached the bottom, the first layer would be replaced with silver, the second layer would be replaced with porcelain, and in the end it might become a rough bowl. Even if it was a rough bowl, it might not reach the hands of the person who was originally rewarded. Jingwan closed her eyes and suppressed the anger in her heart. Go and gather the people. If there's no food, pay the wages. It's fine if we don't encounter it. I'm too far away to help. But since we've encountered it, we should do our best. Jingwan looked at the soldiers who were living in the houses or groaning in pain under the casually built sheds outside. They're doing it for the Qiyuan and for the people. We can't ignore them. Princess is merciful. Merciful? Jingwan laughed mockingly. He was not merciful at all. She supported her husband to start a war in the future, expand the territory and strengthen the Qiyuan. Instead of saying that she was merciful, it was better to say that she was buying people's hearts. If she was said to be buying people's hearts, she could accept it very frankly. After that, Jingwan said a few more points. Every place must be cleaned. The water must be completely boiled every day. The people who took care of the injured must also clean themselves. Not only the environment but also the bodies of the injured must be kept clean. The closer the place was to the wound, the more careful it was. She did not want to rack her brains to explain the specific details. As the saying goes, every profession has its own specialization. I'll just say a few words about these aspects. In the past, you probably didn't pay attention to the details. Once you pay attention to them, I believe that you will definitely be able to do better. There is only one goal, and that is to give them the best care. Don't abandon them and don't give up. Jingwan only used the last 6 words from her previous life. However, at this moment it was undoubtedly touching. Not only were the people who were standing silent, many of the people who were lying on the ground were crying silently. They were clearly very seriously injured, but they did not shed a single tear. It was not that no one had told them to live well, but at that time they were numb and in despair. The people who took care of them had seen too many times and were also numb to it. Many things were done hastily and were done with. Now there were people who cared about them. There were also people who believed that they would not be abandoned and abandoned. Whether they could do it or not, at least at this moment, their hearts were warm and their blood was hot. There were people who were willing to lend a hand here. Even if some people thought that it was useless, at least they wouldn't feel like they were being completely abandoned. This matter spread quickly. However, Jingwan's identity was intentionally concealed. Because her husband was a prince, there was still the emperor above him. If Jingwan did this openly, she would definitely be suspected. At that time, a good thing would turn into a bad thing, a disaster. There was limited manpower. Jingwan basically sent out all the people around her. The reason why it was basically was because she absolutely could not have less people around her. Doctor, I have an idea. Why don't Gongju listen to it and see if it can be done? According to Jingwan's idea, it was to form a battlefield medical team. That's right, they would not be at the back but at the front where the two sides were fighting. They would save as many injured people as possible. It should be known that among those who died in the battle, only a small number died at the first moment. The main reason was that they did not receive treatment and were unable to move. In the end, they died from excessive bleeding or pain. We don't need to go too deep. Just near the edge of the battlefield where there is still space, soldiers will send the injured people down. Even if they can't, they will still be conscious. As long as they persevere, even if they crawl to the side, they will be saved. I believe that all of you know better than me that even if they receive treatment a moment earlier, the number of people who can survive will be less than the original number. Not to mention the doctor, even Gongju's eyes flashed slightly. Your Highness, this idea is not bad, but there are too few doctors. Even here, there are very few people who are truly skilled in medicine. Saving people on the battlefield does not necessarily require medical skills. It is enough to know first aid. For example, know how to stop bleeding and know how to fix broken bones so that it will not cause secondary injuries. Simple first aid is only to help the injured people hold on for a short period of time, and then send them down one by one. What we need to strive for is time. I believe that as long as they go through simple training, many people can do it. The doctor's eyes became brighter. As a military doctor who had been at the rear of the battlefield for many years, he knew better than anyone else how many people could be saved by doing this. Moreover, those who were disabled only had minor injuries, but they ended up being disabled because of suppuration. Some of their bones could be set back, but they did not manage to do so in time. If these people were saved immediately, they could still return to the battlefield. After being baptized by blood, they would be more fearless and brave, and they would also have more experience. Without a doubt, the casualties would be reduced even further. There are indeed fewer doctors at the rear. Regarding this point, we can actually recruit from the people. I believe that there will be some loyal people. Otherwise, we can give them benefits and fame. After all, they are at the rear of the battlefield and there is basically no danger to their safety. Based on the current situation, unless the Qi Yuan army is completely defeated, there will be no problem in this prefecture. However, will the Qi Yuan army be defeated so easily? Your Highness, what you said is indeed very reasonable. I will go and look for General Fu now to recruit the doctors. It will be better if they send an official document. No, I think it is better to do these things in private. Jingwan shook her head. Why? The doctor was puzzled. Jingwan pointed to the sky. To General Fu. Jingwan shook her head again. That is why General Fu can't show up. The doctor was shocked and his expression did not look good. However, he knew the importance of certain things, so he kept his mouth shut. Then I will do it. Jingwan nodded. These things can't be done in a short period of time. We have to do it step by step. However, now that we have a prototype, it should be of great help in the future. Anyway, Jingwan was thinking that if some things were done now, it might be done on a large scale in the future. It would definitely be of great help to the war. Her ability was limited and there was not much that she could do. Moreover, the development of history always needed a process. Things that were too heaven-defying could not appear. However, what Jingwan learned in her previous life was not those. It was just that there was already gunpowder in this spacetime and it was not used in the military. Should she let people study it from this aspect? Gongjiu in this period of time passed down the suture technique. Since you have already specially studied it, the details will definitely be clearer than what I told you at the beginning. You have to explain it to them clearly one by one. This may be a matter that will benefit the present generation and the future generations. You may even record it in the annals of history. Jingwan made a rare joke. Even if it is recorded in the annals of history, the first name should be yours, Wang Fei. Gong Jiu lowered his eyebrows and converged his eyes, speaking quite seriously. Jingwan was also helpless towards a certain person's shadow guards who were basically all expressionless. Don't talk nonsense. You have to do your best for now and also for the future. Towards Jin Qinhuang's ambition, these subordinates basically had some understanding. Therefore Gong Jiu understood what Jingwan was referring to. Yes. Each of them split up to act. Because she saw that everyone was busy, Jingwan wanted to roll up her sleeves and personally do it. At this moment, the pampered lifestyle that she had cultivated in the past, where she stretched out her hand for clothes and opened her mouth for food, seemed to have disappeared without a trace. However, it was very clear that before she could put it into action she was completely stopped. What a joke to let Wang Fei do these things. They could all commit suicide as an apology. Moreover, even if they were injured, even if they were to die, it was impossible to let Wang Fei help look for care. These people also did not have the guts to let Jingwan do it. However, after being stopped, Jingwan also realized that if she really did it when a certain person came back, he would probably personally chop them up. Well, she forgot for a moment that woman did not give or receive personally. Moreover, she was honored, the injured were humble. Finding a stool, Jingwan sat down. She seemed to be lost in thought, but in reality she should be thinking about something. That Wang Fei Nyang. Her thoughts were interrupted. Jingwan regained her senses and looked at the few girls. You are still here? What's the matter? They wanted to say how thoroughly they were ignored. They were clearly living people, so their presence shouldn't be so insignificant, right? However, after being speechless for a moment, they pulled themselves together. Wang Fei Nyang, we also want to help. The matter of recruiting doctors, can you leave it to us? Perhaps they had slightly adapted, although the smell here was still somewhat unbearable, but it was not as unbearable as it was at the beginning. Speaking of which, these girls, to a certain extent, were the local snakes of this prefectural city. They were born in the year of the crab and could do whatever they wanted. If they were to do it, it would indeed save a lot of energy. Moreover, if they were to participate, then these matters would not be easily spread to the capital. Go back and discuss with your family before making a decision. As for the possibility of her organization's matters being exposed, could she say that all the communication channels between the Northwest region and the capital were already in the hands of her husband? If they wanted to secretly communicate with the capital to a certain extent, it was simply courting death. However, Jingwan was still touched that the old doctor took the initiative to help her hide this matter. Because some things could not be said openly, she could only let them do as they wished and remember their kindness in her heart. However, the old doctor had been with the Northeast Army for many years, so his knowledge was indeed extraordinary. The few girls looked at each other. If they wanted to take over this matter, it was indeed impossible for them to do it alone. They would definitely need the help of their family members. Young people always had some impulsiveness and enthusiasm, so they all bid farewell to Jingwan. If the dignified prince could do it, they could naturally do it too. Didn't they always want to do their part for the war? There were even girls who clamored to go to the battlefield. Naturally, they were not allowed to do so. Now that there was someone to lead them, they finally found the right direction. Naturally, they were very excited. After sending the few girls away, Jingwan asked someone to prepare a brush and ink. She began to write and draw. After all, there were many things that she only had a little clue about. Because there were too many things, she might forget another point when she thought of one point. Thus she might as well write down one point by one and then refine it one by one. Perhaps she would give it to others and let them see if it was feasible. If it was feasible, she would add to it and improve it. If it was not suitable, Jingwan would not force it. Time passed in such a hurry. More than 2 hours later. Your Highness, this place is not very good after all. If you stay here for too long, I'm worried that it will affect your health. Why don't you go back first? There are many things that you can slowly think about when you go back. It's the same. Jingwan thought for a while and finally nodded. If there was really a problem, the people around her would not be able to bear the consequences. That's fine too. Jingwan asked someone to inform the old doctor and the others. Then she got up and went back. Once he focused his mind, he would forget everything around him. When Li Hongyuan came back, he saw that Jingwan had almost buried herself in a pile of papers. She was still there writing at a fast speed. After Li Hongyuan came back, he had heard about his wife's actions from his subordinates. So he had already expected that she would be restless. However, who was Li Hongyuan? Naturally, he could see the benefits that these things could bring. However, in his previous life, after Fu Yunting was rehabilitated, Jingwan's actions were also dug out. But why was there no such thing? Li Hongyuan thought for a while and quickly understood the crux of the matter. Li Hongyuan picked up the papers that were scattered on the floor one by one. He shook it a little and looked at it again. Overall, it was very scattered. Some of the things were just concepts and were very rough. Some of the things were very detailed. However, Li Hongyuan could easily pick out the things that were not suitable. It was obvious that this was not her specialty. Many of the things were only vaguely known. She did not understand the actual situation in Qiyuan. Hence it was a little messy. However, with so many things, it was obvious that Jingwan had put in a lot of effort. Of course, Li Hongyuan also noticed that there were a lot of words that were written too quickly. He did not know if it was because she wrote too quickly or something else. After thinking for a while, he realized that it was true. The frequency of the words appearing should not be so high. So, it should be the words from Wan Wan's previous life. Because of this, Li Hongyuan became more and more curious about Jingwan's past. However, curiosity was just curiosity. He had no chance to see it. Jingwan put down her pen and shook her wrist. She raised her hand and rubbed the back of her neck. When she looked up and saw Li Hongyuan, a smile appeared on her face. "Ah Yuan, you're back? How long have you been back? Why didn't you call me?" Li Hongyuan placed the papers in his hand on the table and turned to stand behind Jingwan. He reached out and gently massaged her neck and shoulder. "Seeing that you were so serious, I couldn't bear to disturb you. But why did you have to push yourself so hard? Everything can't be done overnight. It's about time. You need to rest. Otherwise, you don't have to do these things anymore." Jingwan tilted her head and leaned towards Li Hongyuan. "Didn't I accidentally fall into a trance? At the beginning, there were a lot of things that I couldn't sort out clearly, so it seemed a little chaotic. Once things were sorted out, there was nothing for me to do." Of course. If things were sorted out and you still had to do it personally, then there wouldn't be many people left in Qiyuan. It's almost the end. Hey, how can you say that? This is the empire of the Li royal family. Li Hongyuan didn't take it to heart. No dynasty lasts forever. Prosperity and decline, ups and downs. What's there to be concerned about? You're right, but it's not time for Qiyuan to be divided yet. Moreover, I'll have a share of it in the future. So don't talk nonsense. Li Hongyuan's finger brushed across her cheek and he chuckled. It's not even in your mouth yet. Wan, have you already learned how to protect your food? Shouldn't I? Shouldn't you? But Wan is wrong about one thing. You won't just have a share. You'll have all of it. Jingwan smiled. Regarding this point, she did not deny this man's words. What was his was hers. This had nothing to do with her own wishes. Jingwan tugged at him. Come, help me take a look. Help me pick out the ones that are not suitable. There's no hurry. It's already dinner. It won't be too late to take a look after dinner. It's already so late? Time really passed quickly. How's it going on your side? What's the situation? Calm down. Let's eat first. His wife was too diligent. She wouldn't rest until things were done. Didn't she find it tiring? Well, perhaps it was because she had exhausted her brain power, but Jingwan also felt quite hungry. When her stomach was about 40 to 50% full, she slowed down. There was no such thing as not talking while eating between husband and wife. There's something wrong with the feng shui of the altar. It's a treasure land, but it's a haunted house. I don't know if it was a mistake when I checked the feng shui or someone did something bad inside. When the monk who was presiding over the ritual heard about my intention to leave, he was shocked and checked it countless times. Only then did he confirm the real reason. It's obvious that the place is hidden very deeply. A haunted house is easy to gather yin qi. It's reasonable to say that it's only the spirit, so it's better to nourish it with yin qi. However, the imperial noble consort situation is different. The altar is used to pray for blessings. During the war in the northwest, countless yin qi gathered in the altar and all went to the imperial noble consort. According to the situation before we left, you went to see imperial noble consort Shu, but the main influence didn't come from here. If you only found out that something was wrong now, the imperial noble consort Shu you saw probably wasn't dead, but almost like a dead person. Jingwan's expression changed slightly. Then imperial noble consort Shu and imperial noble consort are now. It's okay. Master Liaochen is suppressing it. Then how do you solve the current situation? You were there for a day. Did you solve it? The ritual has already started. The altar can't be destroyed and rebuilt. So the only way is to change the feng shui. There's nothing else for us to do. Good. Then what about the situation in the south? How do you solve it? You don't have to worry about Wan. It'll be solved soon. He had a basic idea of the situation in the south. Since that was the case, Jingwan was relieved. She threw the question aside and didn't ask any more. She began to talk about the things she had prepared. Li Hongyuan was a little helpless. But his wife was so diligent. Wouldn't he be able to slack off in the future? Thinking about it, it seemed to be a good idea. Jingwan still didn't know that her shameless husband was thinking of her as free labor. She talked about some of her plans and ideas. Because it was too divergent, it didn't seem to be limited to the current situation. Unknowingly, some of her ideas had already flown out of the sky. Li Hongyuan listened quietly. Occasionally he would open his mouth to pull Jingwan's thoughts away. No matter what Jingwan said, he would point out the pros and cons of it and the possibility of implementation if he could understand it. If he didn't understand, he would ask for more details and then give his opinion. After a few times, Jingwan slowly came back to her senses. The way she looked at Li Hongyuan was a little strange. She seemed to have said a little too much just now. She seemed to have said a lot of words from her previous life, but this man seemed to be able to understand it without any pressure. Not only that, no matter what she said, he seemed to be able to give effective suggestions. Even if it was just a concept, he could expand it countless times more thoroughly according to his own understanding. He was simply an all-rounder. Even if he was the emperor, didn't he only need to control the overall situation? You're so good. How can those court officials be fooled? How can they slack off? You'll make those people ashamed, you know? What's wrong? https:///11/11807/128638832. Chapter 502. No, I just feel that it's very powerful. Such a high-quality, super rich and handsome man, she seemed to have profited a lot. Li Hongyuan raised his eyebrows and smiled. What's very powerful? Wasn't this asking the obvious? Did he want her to name it? This was actually not a matter of face but narcissism, right? Narcissism. Li Hongyuan pondered for a moment. No, this husband only loves Wan. Was her face smeared with words of love again? A certain someone's ability to speak words of love was originally full, but now was it the rhythm of breaking through the sky? Any time, any place, any topic could be turned to this. However, Jingwan had self-control and was now completely calm. It was just that she seemed to have inadvertently said the words in her heart. This was not good. Li Hongyuan saw that Jingwan was eating very elegantly and seriously and silently smiled. His own wife's way of being shy was really unique. However, a certain someone did not point it out, otherwise his wife would fly into a rage out of humiliation. In the end, it had been a hard day. Although he quite liked to see her angry appearance like a kitten, as a qualified husband he should have a sense of propriety. He also slowly began to eat. To a certain extent, the two people's current actions could be called a model of etiquette at the dining table. Because the two people were chatting, the duration of this meal was much longer than before. Until they finished eating, Jingwan then thought of a problem, that was, why didn't things like the suture technique appear? After all, these things were not that complicated. She only needed to know the general process. According to Jin Qingwang's power and status, as long as she had a little memory, she only needed to say a word and the people below would certainly be able to make it look good. I don't have this kind of memory. Later on, when I was at war with various countries, according to reason, these beneficial things, especially those that you proposed, it's impossible for me not to use them. Can only mean one thing: those who knew about these things all died in that war. Even the remaining things were all destroyed. Li Hongyuan said without any joy or anger. Jingwan fell silent. Then she forced a smile. Maybe it never existed in the first place? Wan, do you believe your own words? Li Hongyuan was surprisingly calm. During the day I met the doctor of the Northeast Army. Because of that old man, some things went smoothly. I was prepared to fight a protracted war with them and let them accept it bit by bit. According to what you said, in your past life, the Northeast Army was completely annihilated. Although the true Maiden Mountain didn't manage to make it out alive, it's still a far cry from the current situation. The old doctor and the others may have died in that battle, so it's impossible for them to help the Northwest Army, so... Li Hongyuan chuckled. There was a hint of mockery in his laughter. Wan has also learned to deceive herself? Maybe a little. Jingwan was discouraged, but a moment later she was in high spirits again. The most important thing right now is that there are some things that must be built up and carried forward. She couldn't help him, but now it's time. Seeing her like this, Li Hongyuan couldn't help but laugh. All his efforts, wasn't it all for her? For her to be so energetic, it was enough. In the days that followed, Li Hongyuan and Jingwan were busy separately. However, on the surface, it seemed that only Jingwan was busy. Jin Qinhuang was the one who looked on with folded arms and was so idle that he was moldy. He would even cause trouble from time to time. Those few young ladies who first came into contact with Jingwan, they had already obtained their family's consent and became Jingwan's helpers. When they first saw Li Hongyuan, perhaps they were blushing and their hearts were racing, feeling a little amorous. Later on, when they realized his true colors, they began to dislike him and even felt injustice for Jingwan. Wang Fei Nyang was a person who was good in every aspect. How could she marry such a wine-sack rice bag? It must be that the imperial power was pressuring people, so Wang Fei Nyang had no choice but to marry. These words, once whispered in front of Jingwan. Jingwan listened and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She turned back and used these words to ridicule a certain person. Unfortunately, a certain person didn't care at all and was willing to be a vase. Thinking about it, if a certain person cared about these things, then he wouldn't have specially created such an unbearable reputation. However, this vase of his, on the surface, it looked like porcelain, but on the inside it was comparable to diamond. Therefore, those who understood his nature would know that not only was he beautiful on the outside, when he swung this vase, those swords, spears, swords and halberds could all be broken in his hands. Towards Jin Qinhuang, it wasn't just these few girls who had complaints. Those who had come in contact with Jingwan, 99% of them had opinions, but they didn't dare to say it. Therefore, every time they saw Jingwan and Li Hongyuan together, they unconsciously shook their heads and secretly sighed. What a pity, ah, what a pity. The expressions and moods of Li Hongyuan's subordinates were quite subtle. Although when they were in the capital, their master was said to have no other good points other than his outer skin, but they had never personally experienced it before. Now they could feel their master being disliked at all times. It was simply too obvious. Each and every one of them looked down and pretended to be deaf and mute, sighing in their hearts. These people were really ignorant and fearless, doing things that all the high officials and nobles in the capital didn't dare to do. And if the people in the capital saw this scene, they would probably be so shocked that their jaws would drop. However, the most surprising thing was probably the indifference of the living king of hell. Therefore, the misunderstanding in this was really a bit big. Everyone in the capital feared Jin Qinhuang and avoided him like the plague. If it wasn't an absolutely safe place, they probably wouldn't dare to say a single bad word about Jin Qinhuang. Naturally, there was no way to know that the living king of hell didn't care about these at all. However, normal people wouldn't care about saying bad things in front of people who were incomparably fearful. Therefore, even if they knew, they still wouldn't dare. Moreover, the living king of hell didn't take these ordinary people seriously. For those with status, he might still be quite giving face. Just like the immortals and Buddhas, they always disdained to pay attention to ants. But for those who were on the same level or lower as themselves, if they offended them, they would still be quite interested in teaching the other party how to be a new person. In Li Hongyuan's case, although his status was on the same level as him, his strength wasn't on the same level. His biggest interest was probably to arm wrestle with the person above him. Jingwan's tolerance towards Li Hongyuan was getting higher and higher. Even if he occasionally caused trouble at most, she would drive him away and continue with what she was doing. However, for those generals in the army, even if Fu Yunting said that Jin Qinhuang was fine, they were still worried and would pay attention to Jin Qinhuang's situation from time to time. When they received the situation, their expressions were also strange and abnormal. After that, they still silently put the matter to one side. After all, what Jin Qinhuang Fei was doing now seemed to be beneficial to them. Those wounded soldiers were once their subordinates. If they said that they didn't feel the least bit heartache, that would be a lie. Even if they couldn't fight together in the future, to be able to receive good care was still gratifying. However, this kind of thinking finally changed when the first batch of wounded soldiers returned in good condition. It must be known that, in their consensus, those who were sent to the rear if not dying were to be sent home. Those who could continue to fight on the battlefield with minor injuries were basically dealt with by themselves. But now some of them came back alive and kicking. How could it not be surprising? Apart from being surprised, they naturally wanted to see it with their own eyes. After all, they had only heard about it before, and those things that they heard basically made them confused. At this time, it had been almost a month since Jingwan and the others arrived in the northwest. During this period there were several large and small battles. There were still people dying in the wounded barracks every day, but compared to the beginning, there was no more death and despair pressing down on their heads. They even took care of each other, encouraged each other, and wanted to live on together. And the biggest change was the surrounding environment. Although the houses were still relatively old, there was no sense of dilapidation. Moreover, it was clean and tidy and there was no unpleasant smell. Is this really the place where the wounded were placed? The generals' hearts were filled with disbelief. Wasn't this change a little too big? The great general and the other generals have come. Their group of people were all wearing armor and were not too conspicuous. Naturally, they were noticed at the first moment. It was not that the generals had never set foot in this place, but it was just that the number of times they had been here was very little. This was because if they saw it too much, they would always feel sad and affect their mood. If they did not adjust in time, it was very likely that it would affect the next battle. Not only did they rarely set foot in this place, even the soldiers under their command basically forbade them from coming over. The reason was all the same. More and more people noticed them, and one by one they looked over. Many people even surrounded them and kept calling out, "Great general, general, some general." It was enough to show that these people were full of feelings for these generals. Their mental outlook was completely different, and their originally gloomy mood was swept away at this time. Good, good. He could not help but reach out and pat their shoulders. This way, even if they were crippled, they still saw hope. Great general. A young man walked forward with his head held high. On the surface, Quan looked fine. Fu Yunting's pupils shrank fiercely. "Xiaohu, you're still alive." As soon as the words left his mouth, he realized that he had said something wrong. It was because he was too shocked. No, that Xiaohu was originally Fu Yunting's personal guard. He was a small team leader and had enough military merits. When he was about to be promoted because he was protecting another soldier, his stomach was directly cut open, and his intestines were already exposed. In such a situation there was no possibility of survival. But now he was standing perfectly fine. Xiaohu could understand his superior's mood very well. He himself couldn't believe that he could survive, so he smiled carelessly. "General, this subordinate is lucky. My stomach was sewn up by Dr. Gong and there are no abnormalities so far. If you ask me, I can go back to the war. Everyone else is fine, but the princess consort is the one who can't get over it. She said that if I don't recover well, it might relapse or even split open. Now that the princess consort is the boss here, we can do whatever she says. If we dare to disobey, we might be surrounded and beaten up by others, so we can only stay here for the time being and help with something. But General, wait for this subordinate, at most 10 days I can definitely go back." Xiao, who was sent here after the first battle after Jingwan and the others came. Fu Yunting's eyes flashed slightly and he patted his shoulder. "Okay, when you come back we will all fight side by side." The most amazing thing was that his stomach could be sewn open again. These generals even wanted to lift his clothes regardless of where they were. Xiao Hu hurriedly stopped him. It was fine if they were in the barracks. Everyone was a man, but not here. Other than the sisters-in-law from the common people, there were also some unmarried young ladies. How could they casually lift their clothes? After Xiao Hu said this, these people embarrassedly stopped. They also knew about this situation, but they forgot for a moment. The wound on his stomach could not be seen, but there was no problem with his forearm. The wound on his stomach was fatal, but there were 7 or 8 wounds on his body. When his sleeve was rolled up, the palm-wide scar looked like a ferocious centipede. However, these generals did not feel that it was ugly or anything but magical. That's right, magical. They did not feel that it was unacceptable at all. In fact, as long as they could keep their lives, this was nothing. "The wound on my stomach is similar to this." Xiao Hu chuckled and patted his stomach. Dr. Gong said that the wounds on my arms and legs are relatively easy to heal. For places like my stomach, especially when it was directly cut, it depends on luck to heal. Can be seen that my life is absolutely tough. Your luck is indeed good. I know about Dr. Gong that you mentioned. He is the person who treated the Empress and the others. His medical skills are absolutely first class. Fu Yunting said with a smile. So powerful? Xiao, who was obviously shocked and a little proud. The Empress, the person who served the Empress, served him. Fu Yunting did not know whether to laugh or cry. Good for you. Let me ask you, are the prince and princess consort always here? The prince is not here every day, but the princess consort is almost always here. He did not care about the former but was full of respect for the latter. Because the difference was too obvious, it was hard for people to ignore it. That is the imperial court's prince. Xiaohu, you cannot be disrespectful. Fu Yunting nervously warned. How terrifying was the king of hell. The average person absolutely could not bear it. Xiaohu also felt that something was wrong. But everyone is the same. Although they did not say it directly, everyone's mood was very obvious. That prince was also not that bad. The young generals who came from the capital looked at each other and muttered, "This vicious beast that specializes in eating people has become a vegetarian." No matter how they thought about it, it felt strange. Shut up. Fu Yunting softly reprimanded. If these words were to reach the king of hell's ears, even if it was really a vegetarian, it could still continue to eat people. They quickly shut their mouths tightly. No matter what, he is a prince. You all have to be respectful. Fu Yunting thought about it and was still a little uneasy. He lowered his voice a little. Prince Jin is known as the king of hell in the capital. When other princes see him, they have to take a detour. It is said that there is only a wrong name, there is no wrong nickname, do you understand? The vicious beast was temporarily not human, but it did not mean that it had really become a vegetarian. This time Xiao, who was not lightly frightened. Would they settle accounts after the autumn? It's okay, Prince Jin does not bear grudges. If he really wanted to, he would have done it on the spot and would not leave it for the future. The only time he left it for the future to settle accounts was when someone thoroughly annoyed him and wanted to seize his title, throwing him into the dust. A certain young general comforted. The corner of Fu Yunting's mouth twitched. He did not want to speak. It was reported on the spot, that was a small matter. Alright, don't say so much. Where is Prince and Wang Fei now? Take us to see them. Fu Yunting stopped him. No matter what, it was not good to talk about people behind their backs. When Fu Yunting and the others arrived, Li Hongyuan naturally received the news at the first moment. When they saw Prince Jin, everyone thought, no wonder. Under an old locust tree, there was a square table with fruit plates, snacks, tea, and even an incense burner. On the reclining chair next to it, Prince Jin was leisurely half reclining with a book in his hand. If it was placed in another place, perhaps it would be pleasing to the eye and no one would be able to hate him. However, at this moment the people around him were busy. His leisure, wasn't it abnormally hateful? Looking at him, they felt their hands itch and wanted to ruthlessly beat him up. Regarding Li Hongyuan's behavior, Jingwan was also very helpless. She felt that he was doing it on purpose. It was not enough that he disliked others for being dissatisfied with him, he still wanted to ruthlessly provoke them. No matter how she looked at it, it felt like he was childish and willful like a child. Jingwan felt that if it was because he wanted to stick to her, he only needed to say a word and she did not have to come here. He did not say anything and she could not help but want to come and take a look. Then he would follow and do things that would attract hatred. Jingwan scolded him, he was still very self-confident. The more others were dissatisfied with him, the more they would think that this Wang Fei was not good. Jingwan was very speechless. She really did not know what he was thinking. Didn't the average person want the two of them to have the same reputation, to make people feel that they were a good match? How could he do the opposite? You have been worshipped as a bodhisattva and I have become that demon king. Isn't it more clear that nothing can be a barrier between us? Jingwan expressed that she really could not keep up with this person's thoughts. His brain circuit was probably different. There was nothing to say, just let him be. She had a pile of serious matters, who had the time to wrangle with him. Fu Yunting paused for a moment but still led the others forward. Greetings to your highness. Li Hongyuan did not even lift his eyelids. He leisurely flipped a page of the book, casually picked up the teacup and took a sip. Scram to the side, you are blocking the light. His tone was exceptionally disdainful. It was really incomparably annoying. What else could they do? Of course, they obediently retreated. Jingwan turned back to take a look. Because she was not done with the matters at hand, she only nodded. The others were basically busy with their own matters. These generals had come over, and it was not the first or second time. They were still doing what they did in the past. For some reason, Fu Yunting's gaze fell on Jingwan. For a moment he seemed to feel that this scene was familiar, and so he accidentally became distracted. As Jingwan's ex-husband, at this moment he was actually staring at Jingwan in a daze. Moreover, he was also noticed by the King of Hell at the first moment. This was simply, Fu Yunting only felt that a black shadow suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. Before he could see clearly, his body flew backwards. Even if there were people behind him who were cushioning him, he did not fly out, but he still fell to the ground with several people. His internal organs seemed to have been dislocated, and he felt a burning pain as he breathed. This was far from over. A hand suddenly clasped his neck and lifted him up. Fu Yunting instinctively struggled, wanting to pry open the hand that was clasping him. However, it was like an iron arm, difficult to move. This sudden change really caught people off guard. However, those generals also subconsciously wanted to save Fu Yunting. However, if they tried to snatch someone from the King of Hell who was going all out, not only would they not be able to snatch him away, they would also probably throw themselves in. Fu Yunting met with Prince Jin's malicious, cold and murderous eyes. He really felt that he was going to die. His neck bones seemed to be cracking. "Ah Yuan." Jingwan's pupils suddenly contracted. She hastily ran over and grabbed Li Hongyuan's hand. Ah Yuan, what are you doing? Quickly let go, let go." Li Hongyuan suddenly turned his head and looked at Jingwan. The emotions in his eyes did not disperse at all. Wan, what did you say?" His tone was much slower than usual. Jingwan only felt her scalp go numb. This person obviously thought that she was helping his love rival, or even adulterer. This person was obviously a bit muddle-headed right now. If she really let him think like this, then it was simply adding fuel to the fire. He despised Fu Yunting for not dying fast enough. The current Fu Yunting in the entire Northwest Army was very important. He had not suffered any injuries on the battlefield, but now he inexplicably died in the hands of his own country's prince. When the time comes, Li Hongyuan would really be condemned by thousands of people. This was not comparable to his previous bad reputation. This was still secondary. The most important thing was that when the two armies confronted each other, the death of Qi Yuan's commander-in-chief was bound to cause chaos. How could the great sage prince of Xiongnu miss such an opportunity? He would inevitably launch a large-scale attack, and the consequences would be unimaginable. "Ah Yuan, it's not like that, really, you have to believe me. You first let go of this person, let go, okay? You let go first, we'll talk slowly. Ah Yuan, I beg you." Meeting Jingwan's pleading eyes, the emotions in Li Hongyuan's eyes finally faded a little and he loosened his grip. How could Fu Yunting still stand? Fortunately, he was supported by several generals in a flurry of hands and feet. Usually they were afraid of the King of Hell, but at this time each and every one of them looked at Li Hongyuan with hatred. Their eyes were full of anger, and they clenched their fists tightly to restrain their anger. Otherwise, they were afraid that they would offend their superiors and unceremoniously swing their fists. Even just now, after witnessing Prince Jin's valiance, they were not afraid at all. "Gongjiu, quickly take a look at this person." Jingwan blocked Li Hongyuan. "What are you guys still standing there for? Help this person and take him further away." After dealing with that side, Jingwan hurriedly pacified Li Hongyuan. Regarding the gratitude and resentment between Li Hongyuan and Fu Yunting, no one else knew about it, so they were all confused. Even Li Hongyuan's trusted aides were baffled by Li Hongyuan's constant targeting of Fu Yunting. Although they knew that their own husband was actually unreasonable, but just now Fu Yunting must have done something that touched his nerves and made him suddenly flip out. Jingwan dismissed the people around her and pressed Li Hongyuan to let him sit down. She stood alone in front of him and softly pacified him. At this time she was really throwing out sweet words and honeyed phrases as if they didn't cost money. She didn't even notice that in this aspect she was also full of skill points. It was just that she would only use it under special circumstances. In fact, Li Hongyuan also didn't completely lose his rationality. Otherwise, before Jingwan stopped him, he had enough time to kill Fu Yunting. That violent mood didn't dissipate so easily, but his rationality came back. Jingwan held his face and was a little impatient. "How did he provoke you to make you so angry? This prince really should have killed him from the beginning." Li Hongyuan's eyes were still full of hostility, almost condensing into a solid form. Jingwan really didn't know what to say. To be honest, she and Fu Yunting didn't have any interactions, but this man's taboo towards her was much, much deeper than Sun Yilin and Qin Jingmin. And Jingwan herself couldn't resolve this matter. If she were to do it, it might become more troublesome. How dare he stare at you in a daze? If he's not courting death, then what is? Li Hongyuan's killing intent at this moment was unprecedentedly strong. Maybe he just happened to be distracted, or maybe he was looking at someone else. It's just that the direction we were looking at just happened to coincide. I don't know him, so how could he stare at me in a daze? In any case, he was born in the Marquis's household, so he should have some manners. So you're saying that it's this prince's fault? He kept calling her this prince, which was enough to show that his anger hadn't subsided at all. How could it be your fault? Of course not. In order to appease a certain someone, Jingwan was quite unprincipled. It's just that it might have caused a misunderstanding. Moreover, you know that Fu Yunting can't die now. If he dies, not only will it lead to the fall of the Northwest, but it will also make His Majesty happy. Wouldn't it be a waste of your efforts? Yuan, even if you don't care, I don't want you to carry unnecessary karmic debts. Not only do we have to be together in this life, we also have the next life, and the life after that. So, calm down a bit, okay? Li Hongyuan sneered, but he was indeed slowly controlling himself. If there's a next time, we'll gouge out his eyes. Jingwan said incomparably, savagely. Li Hongyuan sneered. It was obvious that he despised Jingwan's outwardly strong but inwardly weak appearance. It didn't matter if she despised him or not, the key was to coax him well. This flare-up from time to time, it was tiring to think about it. However, he was her lover and she had been promised to him for generations to come. She had to stay by his side until death, so she had to endure it. On the other side, Fu Yunting's situation wasn't very good. Although his internal organs weren't dislocated, his internal organs were indeed bleeding. In addition, several of his ribs were broken, and the worst was naturally his neck. It was likely that he wouldn't be able to speak for a short period of time. However, Fu Yunting was able to maintain his consciousness. This time he had experienced the feeling of walking through the gates of hell. Although it wasn't the first time that he felt a murderous intent from Jin Qinhuang, he used to think that Jin Qinhuang wouldn't really kill him. However, after just now, he didn't dare to be sure. If it wasn't Jin Qinhuang Fei, however, when he thought of Jin Qinhuang Fei, he felt that it was a bit strange. It wasn't anything else, it was because of what Jingwan said. Gong Jiu's medical skills were indeed not a joke. After a few needles, he basically stabilized Fu Yunting's situation. However, for Fu Yunting's injury to get better, it wasn't something that could be done with a few needles. It's best for General's injury to recuperate in the rear. How can that be? The military camp simply can't do without General. The West Hun New's virtuous king came with a vengeance, wanting to take revenge. If General isn't present, I'm afraid that we won't be able to withstand it. Jin Qinhuang, even if it's a Wang Ye, he also can't. Fu Yunting didn't care about his own injury and abruptly pulled. Gong Jiu lightly shot a glance at that general. If it's just holding the fort in the military camp, it's fine. However, it's impossible to go to the battlefield. If you go, you won't be able to return. Although Wang Ye's temper isn't good, but it's not like he doesn't know the severity of the matter and doesn't care about the overall situation. I'm afraid that General Fu has done something that angered Wang Ye. How can that be? General was just standing there properly and didn't do anything. Gong Jiu ignored him and indifferently looked at Fu Yunting. Before Wang Ye made a move, I'm sure that General knows best what General Fu was doing. Of course, Fu Yunting was clear, but was it really because of this? Fu Yunting coughed twice, his neck burning with pain. Everyone else looked at Fu Yunting in confusion. It couldn't be that General really did something when they weren't aware of it, right? Gong Jiu continued to speak neither too quickly nor too slowly. To our Wang Ye, Wang Fei is the reverse scale. A glance shouldn't cause any harm, but after a long time it's hard to say. No matter what General Fu's reason is, General Fu should pay more attention next time. The other people's faces were inexplicably strange. It can't be right? General really kept staring at Jin Qinhuang Fei? Fu Yunting's face flushed red, but his neck was hurting so badly that he couldn't explain it. Alright, these people really misunderstood. Thus, they subconsciously filled in the scenes of love and hate. That's why, even if it was a group of big men, rough men, one shouldn't underestimate their imaginations. But that's not right, If I remember correctly, when General got married, Wang Fei Nyang had just entered the capital. Wang Fei Nyang had always been outside the capital and General shouldn't have left the capital, so they shouldn't know each other. Could it be that General has wronged sister-in-law and later took a fancy to Wang Fei Nyang, and until now he's still? Fu Yunting couldn't bear it anymore and suddenly stood up, slapping that young general on the head. With this movement, the pain in his chest was almost fatal. However, he still had to say it clearly. Shut up. Fu Yunting endured the pain, his voice was very hoarse. Just now, I was just thinking about other things and was absent-minded. Don't spoil Wang Fei Nyang's reputation. The real reason couldn't be explained, so in the end he was still in the wrong. If that's the case, Jin Qinhuang is too unreasonable. In your eyes, hasn't the King of Hell never been reasonable? Gong Jiu faintly replied. That young general was choked and couldn't say anything. No matter if it's a misunderstanding or some other reason, General Fu can only admit that he's unlucky. Perhaps this can be considered a lesson. Gong Jiu was a shadow guard. When they carried out their mission, they didn't necessarily rely on assassination. Their ability to control people's hearts far surpassed that of ordinary people. Fu Yunting glanced at Gong Jiu, hearing his meaning but didn't say anything. In the end, it was for a reason, and on top of that, they met an unreasonable person who they couldn't afford to offend. It seemed that other than admitting that he was unlucky, there was no other way. But thinking about it, if it was himself, the wife that he kept in his heart, was stared at by a man without blinking, he might also flip out. Thinking about it this way, his hatred towards Jin Qinhuang was reduced by a lot. However, for them this was also a lesson. No matter if it was a young wife or a young lady, it was best not to stare at people for no reason. Even if it was to think about something, it was best to choose a position in advance. Otherwise, if they met such a fierce person like Jin Qinhuang, if they weren't careful, they might even lose their lives. Speaking of fierce, wasn't Jin Qinhuang's martial arts a bit too good? In the army, their great general's individual strength might not be the strongest, but it wasn't a problem for him to be ranked in the top few. When there was nothing to do, they would often exchange pointers in the barracks. Everyone knew that even if they were stronger than him, they wouldn't be that much stronger. It was impossible that they didn't even have the power to fight back. And the people who came down from the battlefield, their vigilance was quite strong. When facing an opponent, if it was Jin Qinhuang, they might not fight back because of their identity. But when they were distracted, fighting back was instinct, and it was the strongest instinct. Their great general didn't resist at all and was completely hung up and beaten. It was enough to see that he didn't have the ability to fight back. When other people came forward, they were also tidied up together. It could be seen that Jin Qinhuang was valiant. If Jin Qinhuang was on the battlefield, he would definitely be invincible. Someone couldn't help but secretly think. But thinking about it, they knew that it was impossible. He was a Qinhuang. Right now, the struggle for the throne was in full swing. If Jin Qinhuang descended on the battlefield like a god of war, how terrifying would the morale of the army be? With hundreds of thousands of troops in his hands, not to mention the other princes, even the emperor would have to be restless. The gazes of the great general vaguely glanced at Jin Qinhuang. Fine, it was better to forget it. If a man didn't have that thought, no matter how strong he was, he wouldn't be able to be a man of iron. This kind of man was only suitable for a gentle village, to be gentle and soft. It was just that one day when Li Hongyuan was about to go to war, they would completely change their thinking. Jingwan coaxed him and felt that it was better to go back earlier. After all, Fu Yunting's current situation wasn't suitable for avoiding. Even if he knew Jingwan's thoughts, Li Hongyuan's face darkened, but in the end he still followed them. When they wanted to leave, including Fu Yunting, they naturally had to force themselves to stand up and send them off. Li Hongyuan just stood there, but the aura on his body was completely unconcealed. These great general who fought their way out from a pile of corpses couldn't help but feel a chill run down their backs. Gong Jiu, treat General Fu as much as you want. Just now, the exchange of pointers, Ben Wang was quite unsatisfied. When General Fu recovers, Ben Wang still wants to ask for advice. Gong Jiu responded. Fu Yunting was complaining incessantly in his heart. If he had to exchange pointers a few more times, wouldn't he have to throw away his little life? But could he not respond? The memory of the exchange of pointers was still vivid in his mind. Should he not respond? It would only be more miserable. Although by exchanging pointers with Jin Qinhuang his improvement would be quite fast. When Li Hongyuan left with Jingwan, that stifling feeling disappeared. However, after this battle, those who originally had feelings for Li Hongyuan did not dare to blatantly show it. Who was the great general? The Northwest Army's hundreds of thousands of soldiers. If he wanted to clean them up, then what did they count as? If he was angry, he could crush them to death with one finger. This small episode for the time being passed like this. But the next day the great sage king of the Western Xiongnu personally led his army to challenge. At this time Fu Yunting, let alone going on the field to fight, even if he put on his armor his face would still be pale. Speaking of which, Fu Yunting had never fought with the great sage king of the Western Xiongnu before. The last time he seriously injured the great sage king, it was all because of a trick. Then the great sage king was injured by several people. Speaking of which, the original plan was to completely detain the great sage king, but in the end he still managed to escape. From this, it can be seen that the great sage king is not only good at scheming, but his martial arts are also quite strong. One must know that the Xiongnu army's strength is originally known for their bravery. This was the first time the great sage king directly called out Fu Yunting. What does this mean? Could it be that there are spies in the Qiyuan army? How did they find out about Fu Yunting's injury in such a short period of time? https://11/11807/129226664. Mobile Edition. Chapter 503. The West Hun tribe's king of the virtuous Western Hun tribe was probably just probing to see if there was a change in Qiyuan's commander-in-chief, or if there was a problem. He did not expect to hit the mark by a fluke. Of course, he could not rule out the possibility of a spy, but this possibility was relatively small. After all, everything was fine before and there was no trouble. Furthermore, since Jin Qinhuang dared to bring Jin Qinhuang along, he must have understood the situation here and cleaned up everything that needed to be cleaned up. It was hard to say how many people Jin Qinhuang had planted here, but it was definitely not a small number. Previously, he did not give him any information, but Jin Qinhuang was able to understand the situation here clearly. He even asked him to inform him of the Xiongnu's military strength and arrange tactics. If he did not have any manpower, would he be able to do this? After arriving, he was afraid that the defenses would be even tighter. Spies were only a small number of people, so it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens to enter and leave. However, the current situation was indeed a little tricky. If he did not respond to this battle, it would definitely affect his own morale. Being afraid before the battle was definitely a taboo. But if he responded, there was no doubt that Fu Yunting would not be able to return. This was the third time that the Xiongnu had sent people to the front of the battle. If he did not respond, it would also cause chaos on his own side. The West Hun tribe's king of the virtuous Western Hun tribe would definitely take the opportunity to do something. Otherwise, it would be a waste of such a good opportunity. Follow me out first. There was no good solution at the moment, so Fu Yunting decided to go to the front to take a look. General, how can your body? Fu Yunting waved his hand. I don't have to fight, but I can't not show myself. It was just that because of his injuries he could not wear armor. However, Fu Yunting thought about it and already had a way to deal with it. He did not even bother to hide his relatively pale face because this could be an opportunity for him to probe the enemy. Even if he wore a brocade robe, he would look like a noble young master and not an invincible commander-in-chief on the battlefield. Before the battle, he paused and went to the watchtower. He did not go to the top floor but to the middle floor. He used the clairvoyance to take a look. There was really a lot of people. The all-seeing eye spun in his hand and turned around to descend the watchtower. Fu Yunting got on the horse nimbly. If his body was fine, there would be no problem. But at this time it seemed like he was trying to act cool. However, he had no choice. He could not let the soldiers know about his physical condition. So he was not trying to act cool but to suffer. Fu Yunting rode his horse to the front of the formation, and the formation automatically dispersed. He walked to the front and faced the West Hun tribe's virtuous king from a distance. Both sides had more than 30,000 people on the same field. From afar they looked densely packed. However, at this moment it was very quiet. It seemed that only the sound of the wind and the sound of the war horses could be heard. I trust Virtuous Monarch has been well since we last met. I had wanted to meet Virtuous Monarch for a long time, but I couldn't find the opportunity. The field was too wide. If they wanted to spread their words far enough, they naturally needed someone to shout. Although the two commanders of the two armies shouted across the air, their voices wouldn't be as loud as mosquitoes. In addition, martial artists had sharp ears and eyes. It was enough for them to hear each other. However, on the battlefield there were some things that needed more people to know. So, it was necessary to have some loud voices in the army. I also have this regret. That's why I specially chose today. However, it seems that General Fu does not intend to accept the challenge. The West Han tribe's virtuous king had lived outside for many years. His first stop was Qiyuan. Moreover, he had lived there for the longest time. If he wanted to understand a country's culture, the language was naturally the first test. This virtuous king was actually quite talented in this aspect. He could speak authentic Qiyuan's official language very smoothly. Moreover, there were many people around him who understood Qiyuan's language. And this virtuous king, compared to the other Han tribe soldiers, was not as tall and sturdy. Even if he was influenced by the culture of other countries, his words and actions were like those around him, revealing a scholarly aura. He did not fit in with a group of barbarians. This was also where some people who fought for power with him attacked him. It's not that I don't want to fight hard. It's just that unfortunately my general's health has not been good for the past 2 days. I'm afraid that I can't let virtuous king enjoy to your heart's content. I hope that virtuous king will forgive me. Fu Yunting was very elegant and sincere. I see. If I forced General Fu to fight, wouldn't I be at a disadvantage? However, in my Han tribe there is no reason to take back a challenge. Han tribe men, even if they have to crawl, they must crawl to accept the challenge. Judging from virtuous king's words, you must fight? If that's the case, then so be it. Men, bring me my weapon. Fu Yunting said calmly. As for what he was thinking in his heart, that was a completely different matter. General, you can't, your health. Fu Yunting waved his hand. It's fine. It's just a cold. It's not to the extent that I can't fight. Moreover, this general believes that virtuous king will not take advantage of me. He ordered a guard to bring the halberd. Fu Yunting's expression was indifferent, but in reality he was extremely uncomfortable. Just by holding the halberd he was already faintly sweating. However, he could not let others see the slightest bit of strain. He tried his best to be as calm as possible. Right now his throat hurt the most. Originally it was best not to speak, but if he raised his voice, it would be burning. His legs squeezed the horse's belly and he rode towards the middle of the two armies. Right now he was only gambling. He was gambling on the virtuous king's demeanor, gambling on the Xiongnu people's integrity. He was gambling that the virtuous king was still probing. The Xiongnu people were valiant and had their own pride. They would never retreat. Even if they knew that the opponent's condition was not good, they would not easily make a move. Even if they won, it would be an unfair victory. However, in a battle between two armies, there was a precondition to not taking advantage of the opponent's situation. One could not easily kill the opponent. If the virtuous king knew that Fu Yunting's current condition was not a match for one of his attacks, it would be strange if the virtuous king did not take the opportunity to kill Fu Yunting. Killing their general in front of tens of thousands of generals would cause the morale of the army to collapse. Compared to an unprecedented victory, compared to fertile land, abundant food and countless beautiful women, the virtuous king's demeanor and integrity could be used to feed grassland wolves. Fu Yunting rode his horse farther and farther away. The virtuous king of the West Xiongnu people also rode his horse and slowly came out. Seeing that the distance between them was getting closer and closer, Fu Yunting's heart trembled. What was going on? Could it be that there was really a spy? Just now, the virtuous king was not probing but forcing him to accept the challenge? If that was really the case, then he could only fight to the death. His heart had already made a decision. Fu Yunting raised his hand, shook the reins and sped up. However, at this time the virtuous king reined in his horse. Since General Fu is not feeling well, then why don't we fight another day? Fu Yunting also reined in his horse in time. Wait until this marshal's body is better. Even if the virtuous king did not invite me, this marshal would still want to exchange pointers with the virtuous king. Fu Yunting held his weapon and cupped his hands, then pulled the reins and turned around. However, after he turned around, his expression became a little strange. In the Qiyuan army's formation, his original position had already been replaced by someone. At first glance, It was a person who did not seem to fit in with the surroundings. However, after a slight feeling, it was as if he had completely merged with the surroundings. The appearance of Jin Qinhuang made Fu Yunting a little unrealistic. Did Jin Qinhuang specially come to help him out? Well, forget about it. Li Hongyuan rode his horse over. He was not as slow as Fu Yunting was before. In a very short time he had already reached Fu Yunting's side. He raised his chin at the virtuous king. The strongest in the Xiongnu army? That kind of arrogance, Fu Yunting could not help but twitch the corner of his mouth. In any case, he suppressed it in the end. However, he roughly understood what kind of image Jin Qinhuang intended to show others. Whether it was the Xiongnu army or the generals on his side who did not know, this kind of appearance was indeed beneficial. This kind of completely brainless appearance, many things would not be connected to him. On his side, because there were few people who knew, then even if there were spies, they would not be able to get much valuable information from Huasa. This was because this direction was wrong from the beginning. Replying to the Wang Ye, this general does not know. Fu Yunting showed enough respect, but did not have the slightest bit of humility. He did not lack the bearing that a general should have. You are not the general of Qiyuan, how could you not know? Li Hongyuan was very dissatisfied with his attitude. Wang Ye, the Xiongnu army is innumerable. The ones who fought with this general were only a few. Fu Yunting was not polite as he pointed out Li Hongyuan's ignorance. Li Hongyuan looked at Fu Yunting with a somewhat sinister gaze. Fu Yunting lowered his eyebrows and restrained his gaze, but his expression was indifferent. It was clear that his respect for him was only because of the other party's identity. It had nothing to do with anything else. Since it is like this, you can scram back. Then he pointed the spear in his hand at the virtuous king of the West Xiongnu. If you are the strongest of the Xiongnu, then stay. If you are not, then scram back. Call out the strongest for Ben Wang. The virtuous king was not angry. He even smiled warmly. However, in his heart he was most likely evaluating Li Hongyuan. I wonder which Wang Ye of Qiyuan it is? In fact, he already had a rough idea. After all, when the emperor of Qiyuan celebrated his birthday last year, the virtuous king also made arrangements for the people he sent to the capital of Qiyuan. He paid a lot of attention to the good-looking Jin Wang Ye, who was favored by the emperor and had a bad temper. Don't talk nonsense. This is a battlefield. It is not a place for you to have a friendly conversation. Or is it that the battlefield is actually like this? Even if Ben Wang has not seen him, he is not easy to fool. Let's see who is the real deal. Otherwise, Li Hongyuan's eyes were full of hostility. Leave your head with Ben Wang. The Jin Wang Ye of Qiyuan was arrogant and condescending. He had no power, but no one dared to provoke him. The virtuous king thought of the people who returned to the Xiongnu and evaluated this Wang Ye. Now that he saw the real person, he had more considerations in his heart. In that case, Wang Ye might as well wait for a moment. Whether it was because of his status or something else, the virtuous king would not easily make a move. The virtuous king turned around and said a few words in the Xiongnu language. Then a burly man came over on a horse. Speaking of which, there was indeed a saying that went, enemies are destined to meet. Under the Xiongnu king there were left and right virtuous kings, left and right grain kings, left and right generals, left and right commandants, left and right great Donghu, left and right marquis of Gudu, and so on. There were 48 banners of 10,000 cavalry. Of course, although the name was famous, the subordinates were not necessarily full. It was just like the Qiyuan. And this person was the right general, a hardcore supporter of the virtuous king. In Li Hongyuan's previous life he had fought with him. Li Hongyuan's martial arts in his previous life was certainly far inferior to the present. In that fight he almost suffered a big loss. In this life, since he saw him in advance, then he would send him to the Yellow Springs in advance. Li Hongyuan's eyes flashed with a bloodthirsty edge. He did not care about the rules of the battlefield. In any case, he did not understand the rules now. He raised his spear and rushed forward on his horse. In the most direct collision of strength, Li Hongyuan still felt that his strength was slightly weaker. This could not be helped. He did not have the opponent's advantage, just like He Zhihai. However, even if this was the case, it did not mean that Li Hongyuan would lose. No one would stupidly use their weakness to attack the opponent's strength. On the contrary, after the first strike, the opponent's strength would be infinitely inflated. Clang, clang, clang. The weapons clashed, sparks flew everywhere. It looked like they were evenly matched. However, only those who were close to the battle, such as the virtuous king and Fu Yunting, knew that the more they fought, the more excited the right general of the West Xiongnu tribe became. The virtuous king knew that this was not good. Naturally, he did not want his number one general to fall here. He did not wait any longer and urged his horse to help. Fu Yunting was about to stop him, but Li Hongyuan suddenly changed his method of attack. He feinted with his spear, and then the cold light of the spearhead directly disintegrated the right general's head. Blood splattered and gradually landed on the virtuous king's face. At that moment, the virtuous king was stunned. However, when the silver light flashed, he hurriedly turned his horse around and quickly retreated. Li Hongyuan did not chase after him. He just watched as the virtuous king fled. Then, with a thrust of his spear, he raised the head that was already full of filth and stared like a copper bell. The head was raised at an angle. Li Hongyuan was very disdainful. The strongest of the Xiongnu tribe? Oh, it's only as a... The virtuous king escaped from the danger zone. When he turned around, he saw Li Hongyuan and the head. His eyes were about to split open. Then the bugle call for both sides to fight sounded at the same time. The sound of killing shook the sky. Because of Li Hongyuan's actions, the morale of the Qiyuan army could be said to have soared by more than 30%. Fu Yunting probably did not expect that the final result would be like this. However, at this time his mind was very clear. "Thank you for today, Your Highness. It's just that swords have no eyes on the battlefield. Your Highness, please withdraw from the battlefield." Li Hongyuan glanced at him lightly. He was indeed not prepared to go to the battlefield. With a wave of his hand, the head accurately fell into Fu Yunting's arms. If this head was one of his own people, Fu Yunting would not dislike it. He would probably fall into endless grief. The problem was that it belonged to the enemy. No matter how he looked at it, it was very unpleasant. However, this was a head that could weaken the enemy and increase the morale of his own side. He could not just throw it away like this. However, the Xiongnu people had short hair. This head was shaved in the middle. It was really difficult to carry. Fu Yunting casually threw it out. With a wave of his spear, the short blade horizontally pierced the head. Fu Yunting followed Li Hongyuan and rode back. The two armies were getting closer and closer. Because the Xiongnu people had lost a great general, they were raging with anger. Furthermore, Fu Yunting and Li Hongyuan were not wearing armor. The virtuous king gestured and ordered a Xiongnu person to take out a strong bow. 2 arrows Xiao pierced through the air. "General, be careful." Li Hongyuan suddenly abandoned his horse and turned around. With a flick of his spear, the 2 arrows were cut off one after another. Li Hongyuan's upper body leaned forward, his spear slanted towards the sky. Using the mana under his feet, he rushed out like a cheetah. Evidently, Jin Qinhuang, who had originally lost interest in the upcoming battle, was provoked because of this arrow. He decided to let the spear in his hand continue to drink blood. Facing the ordinary Xiongnu soldiers, it was like a wolf in a flock of sheep. Wherever the spear went, it brought out endless amounts of blood. One by one, the Xiongnu soldiers fell to the ground. There was no need to check. There was absolutely no one alive. Chapter 504. Li Hongyuan shook off the blood droplets on his spear. These ordinary soldiers were so afraid of him that they would stay as far away from him as possible. However, after killing so many of them, he would lose interest. Furthermore, no matter how capable a person was, how many people could he kill even if he was able to kill them all in one blow? Not only was it tiring, but the deterrent effect was also limited. Li Hongyuan turned his attention to the generals and consciously started to search for them. It was not difficult to find these people. As the saying goes, soldiers against soldiers, generals against generals. The difference between generals and soldiers was very big. Under normal circumstances, due to the chaos, no one would have the time to search for these people. However, the King of Hell was too cruel. If he did not take the initiative to attack, he would become very idle. If he wanted to, he could probably do something like drinking tea among the pile of corpses. Li Hongyuan used the tip of his tongue to sweep the corner of his mouth. There seemed to be a drop of blood there. Li Hongyuan chose his target and was ready to attack. These generals wanted to escape as easily as the soldiers, but it was not that easy. This was because the people that Li Hongyuan chose all had opponents. If they suddenly turned around and ran after clashing weapons with their opponents, would they be courting death? Li Hongyuan was not embarrassed at all about attacking from the side and robbing others of their battle achievements. After all, he was just killing people. Li Hongyuan specifically chose to attack under such circumstances. In a very short period of time he had already killed more than 3 Xiongnu generals. Naturally, every time a general was killed the news would be publicized. His motive was obvious. From the beginning until now the Xiongnu people had lost more than 10,000 men in just over an hour. This was definitely not normal for the valiant Xiongnu army. This was also far beyond King Virtuous Sage's initial expectations. However, the current situation was extremely unfavorable for the Xiongnu people. Based on their current morale, if they continued to fight, their losses would only increase. There would not be any improvement. King Virtuous Sage had no choice but to order a retreat. It was just that right now for Qi Yuan the situation was great. How could he let go of such a good opportunity? Fu Yunting only briefly inspected the battlefield, then immediately gave the order to pursue. With this pursuit they directly chased for 50 miles. Then the Qi Yuan army set up camp. Could be said to be a great victory. And in this battle, it was clear that Jin Qinhuang had made great contributions, although to a certain extent, there was a lot of coincidence in it. Basically, even if it was replicated in the future, it should not achieve the same effect. However, the final result could not be denied. Therefore, even if this battle was over, there were still people excitedly discussing Jin Qinhuang's bravery. It's just that it seemed that she hadn't seen Jin Qinhuang's figure at all. Wanting to take a look at this Wang Ye wasn't possible. Fortunately, it was confirmed that he had returned and nothing unexpected had happened. Fu Yunting dragged his unwell body and quickly and steadily arranged the follow-up matters. Soon after, Fu Yunting received a report that the wounded from this battle had been properly settled. That's right, the rescue team formed by Jingwan appeared for the first time today. It was also the first time that Jingwan was so close to the front line. Although she couldn't see the specific situation, she could hear the continuous shouting. Just by listening to it she could feel her body tensing up and she had to be on full alert. It was as if the enemy would appear beside her at any time. If she wasn't careful she could be beheaded and die. At the same time she also witnessed the rescue team's first operation with her own eyes. Their actions were swift and effective. They were busy but not disorderly. To be honest, compared to Jingwan's expectations it was much better. In Jingwan's view, when the two sides were fighting, it would be enough if they could get to the side and save people. However, Jingwan had underestimated them. Because this group of people were not ordinary people. Not to say that they were well trained, but at least they were veterans who had shuttled through the foul winds and bloody rain many times. They carried with them not only first aid items, stretchers and other things, but also murder weapons that could be used at any time. Perhaps because she hadn't witnessed the scene, Jingwan could still be considered calm. Looking at all the things they had prepared, she finally knew that these were actually Gong Jio's handiwork. It seemed that there was nothing strange about it. In the end, Gong Jio was born as a shadow guard. No matter how much he changed, his ferocity could not be ignored. Jingwan looked at those small and convenient weapons and suddenly thought of something. That was the tri-edge bayonet that was rumored to be a little evil in her previous life. That thing, Jingwan definitely had not come into contact with it. Most of the information she had about it came from hearsay and the internet. However, it seemed that it was internationally certified as the most poisonous bayonet. It was banned and was only used for ceremonial performances. Its design was mainly for stabbing and bleeding. Common weapons such as slashing, picking and cutting were usually weaker. After piercing into a person's body, air would be quickly drawn in through the blood groove. The air would form a large amount of bubbles in the body, blocking the blood vessels. As long as the bayonet pierced about 8 centimeters into any part of the body, it would be able to kill the enemy immediately. Moreover, the bayonet could be pulled out effortlessly in the body cavity where negative pressure was eliminated. It seemed that a certain amount of arsenic was added during the smelting process due to the nature of the metal. When the surface of the bayonet was worn off on the battlefield, the steel body containing arsenic was exposed. Even if the bayonet only scratched the enemy's skin, it would be very difficult to heal. This led to the legend that the bayonet had been soaked in poison. However, it was different now. With a little modification it could be directly soaked in poison and no one would question it. Therefore, when the tri-edge bayonet was in the hands of her lord husband and then passed through Gong Jio's hands, it might really be able to reach the legendary level and become an excellent weapon. Although to some extent it might be more suitable for shadow guards to use. Because she couldn't get involved, they also didn't allow her to get involved. Allowing her to stand here was already the limit of their tolerance. Jingwan naturally stood obediently at the side and didn't easily go forward to disturb them. Even if she discovered something wrong, she would only remember it in her heart. Speaking of which, if she didn't need someone to protect Jingwan at all times, Jingwan feared that she wouldn't even stay here. After all, if she didn't need protection, then there would be more people who could free up their hands to help. She would be a burden here. However, Jin Qinhuang had a rigid rule that no one could resist. Therefore, no matter where she was, she needed to occupy a portion of the manpower. Before Li Hongyuan came back, these people had been busy and Jingwan had been standing at the side like a wooden stake. Looking at the wounded people, either missing an arm or a leg or covered in blood, there were those who were lying on the stretcher and probably only had a breath left. Even if they did so much effort, there would still be countless lives that would fade away. At this moment, Jingwan's heart was surprisingly indifferent. It was as if she had seen too much and became indifferent. "What are you thinking about?" Li Hongyuan's hand gently rubbed her face. Jingwan was startled and came back to her senses. After half a beat, she revealed a shallow smile. "You're back?" As if she didn't notice the bloodstains on Li Hongyuan's body and the murderous aura that hadn't completely faded away. Jingwan's startled appearance was too obvious. It was impossible to ignore. It was reasonable to say that in such an environment, it shouldn't be like this. "Wan, what are you thinking about so deeply?" After all, it was the first time that Li Hongyuan had encountered such a scene. He was a little worried that Jingwan wouldn't be able to bear it. Even when he saw her in his previous life, she was so fearless, courageous, and tenacious. After all, that was tempered by wind and frost. No one was born to adapt to such a scene. "It's nothing." In fact, Jingwan really wasn't thinking about anything. She was in a daze. Perhaps her mind was blank. Then she belatedly realized that something was wrong with Li Hongyun's body. "Your Highness, you've sent Buddha to the west? Some people are looking for death. It's rare for your husband to do a good deed and send them on their way. If they heard you say that, those who died at your hands would cry." But this had nothing to do with Jingwan. "Are you hurt?" She pulled him over and looked at him from head to toe. She wasn't sure if the blood on his body was his or someone else's. But after a closer look where the blood stains were, his clothes didn't seem to be damaged. "Don't worry. I'm not hurt. There's not even a scratch." Jingwan sighed and nodded. Although she knew that his martial arts skills were outstanding and that he had rich experience on the battlefield, it was a war. Thousands of years passed in the blink of an eye. Moreover, it was never a place to show off one's heroism. Therefore, as long as he didn't return safely, her heart would be in the air. Go back? Because Jingwan knew what he had done, she didn't restrain some of the frightening things about her. And Jingwan didn't treat him strangely. Regarding this, Li Hongyuan was quite happy. But after all, it made people feel uncomfortable whether it was Wan or himself. Therefore, it was necessary to freshen up and change clothes as soon as possible. Jingwan nodded and took the initiative to hold Li Hongyuan's hand. Li Hongyuan's eyes moved slightly. His wife seemed to be a little clingy today. If it was in the past when there were outsiders, she wouldn't act so intimately. Even if he wanted to be closer, she might smile and avoid him. Li Hongyuan calmly returned her hand and led her away. Jingwan followed closely behind, appearing very quiet. At this point, if he still said that he was fine, then Li Hongyuan as a husband would be a waste. However, Li Hongyuan could roughly guess the reason for Jingwan's current state. In the end, it was because it was her first time. Li Hongyuan wanted to hold up the sky for Jingwan. He wanted her to live a carefree life. However, from time to time he let Jingwan experience things that ordinary people couldn't bear. It seemed very contradictory, but if one thought about it carefully, it didn't seem difficult to explain. After all, Li Hongyuan himself was different. He was also very clear that Jingwan was not a daughter flower that could accompany a lifetime. Like Jingwan, he also wanted her to walk side by side with him. Therefore, when Jingwan wanted to learn more and come into contact with more things, he didn't hesitate to give all his support and help. He didn't completely hide anything from her and completely raised her like a canary, not knowing the slightest bit of danger. In terms of feelings and towards this person, he had an absolute possessiveness. In addition, he didn't create a narrow cage, but opened up an endless battlefield for her to use and gallop freely. As for Jingwan's current situation, Li Hongyuan couldn't very well persuade her with words. He simply didn't do anything useless. The plan to go back was temporarily put on hold and he brought her around casually. The place they were at now wasn't far from the Qiyuan's camp. Felt like it was just on the side. At this time there weren't people busy shuttling back and forth, because they had received Fu Yunting's order to break camp and move forward 50 miles. Li Hongyuan pulled Jingwan directly into the camp. Fortunately, the first person they met was the one who had seen Li Hongyuan at the beginning. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to enter at all. When they saw this living ancestor, they naturally didn't dare to say anything. Although he didn't participate in the previous battle, it didn't mean that he didn't hear any news. Didn't he see that this person was still covered in blood? He didn't know what the other party was going to do, but he was also worried that there would be comrades who didn't recognize Jin Qinhuang that would cause unnecessary trouble for him. Therefore he could only brace himself and follow. In the end he was his own country's Qinhuang, and with his performance on the battlefield, it could be assumed that he absolutely wouldn't do anything that would harm the Qiyuan. Li Hongyuan's speed was relatively slow. He just walked quietly and didn't speak. A place like the military camp for a woman was an absolute forbidden area. Jingwan believed that if she wasn't brought by Li Hongyuan, perhaps she would never be able to set foot in this place. She was completely unfamiliar with it, so naturally she would be filled with curiosity. Of course, as far as the eye could see, there were large and small tents that were being deftly dismantled by the logistics personnel. Unknowingly, Jingwan was led by Li Hongyuan to the front of the largest tent. They were stopped by the soldiers who had been guarding the front of the tent. They also knew this living king of hell, but no one knew what important things were inside the commander-in-chief's tent. The commander-in-chief wasn't there, so naturally they couldn't easily set foot in it. Therefore they could only brace themselves and stop them. Get lost. Li Hongyuan didn't restrain his terrifying aura. Jingwan wasn't affected, but it didn't mean that others could be unperturbed. Being stared at by him without any emotion, they only felt a chill run up from the bottom of their feet. Their whole body stiffened and their willpower was greatly challenged. It seemed that if he continued to stare, no matter who it was, they would choose to unconditionally submit. Jingwan pulled Li Hongyuan and advised, Wang Yi, they are also loyal to their duty. Don't make things difficult for them. It's already inappropriate for us to enter the military camp without permission. After that, she realized that they were still holding hands. She forced herself to be calm and tried to pull her hand away. Unfortunately, she didn't succeed and could only give up. If they opened the door for anyone who oppressed them, wouldn't everything be a mess? Wang Yi should be lucky to have such loyal people. Li Hongyuan looked at Jingwan from behind. The way he looked at the two soldiers didn't seem to be any different. Jingwan wasn't the least bit afraid. Instead she laughed. This should be General Fu's tent. General Fu? Hearing Jingwan's words, Li Hongyuan's face instantly darkened. He pulled Jingwan away. Following behind Li Hongyuan, Jingwan covered her mouth and laughed unkindly. Chapter 505. Following behind Li Hongyuan, Jingwan covered her mouth and laughed somewhat unkindly. But that was it. She didn't mention Fu Yunting anymore for fear that it would agitate someone and cause trouble for Fu Yunting. Speaking of which, Fu Yunting was innocent and was originally targeted by Jin Qinhuang for no reason. She was deliberately using him to agitate someone. That would be too tragic. Moreover, at that time the one who would be miserable would not only be Fu Yunting, but most likely she would also be. However, with such a small episode, looking at Jingwan's current appearance, that invisible influence seemed to have weakened a lot. They continued to stroll around the military camp. The military camp had to accommodate tens of thousands of people, including eating, sleeping, training, and so on. It could be imagined that the area of the entire camp would be quite considerable. Li Hongyuan led Jingwan and talked about some things. From time to time he would introduce the various layout of the camp to Jingwan, what the positions were, what they were used for. He was quite familiar with all of these. Without getting close he could immediately say 1, 2, 3, 3, 3 and so on. But according to his picky temperament and his dislike of Fu Yunting, the living king of hell would nitpick the entire way, where there was something wrong, where there was something not done well. Jingwan found it funny and nodded her head in a deadpan manner. This man's indifferent tone was picky and his serious face was narrow-minded. Those who didn't know might think that Jin Qinhuang was very powerful. She had noticed all these details and must remember them. Next time she couldn't make the same mistake. For example, the soldier who had been following them. But wasn't the other party just a Wang? How could he know so much about the things in the camp? It must be known that in Qiyuan, it wasn't that there hadn't been a special case of a prince holding military power, but it was under special circumstances. Once the army returned to the court, the military power would be handed over immediately. And this Wang Ye, logically speaking, should not know about the layout of the camp. These were things that he shouldn't be in contact with, but he was familiar with them and casually spoke about them. It was frightening to think about. The accompanying soldier quickly threw away the thoughts in his mind. There were some things that he could not even think about. In any case, he was just a small pawn. What did the people in the capital have to do with him? As for Jingwan, who knew her husband's temperament very well, she was delighted to know his true feelings. However, Jingwan still learned a lot from Li Hongyuan's narration. It could be said that she had gained a lot of knowledge and broadened her horizons. Unknowingly, a trace of pride and a certain kind of feeling had arisen in her. Half of the base of the camp had been removed, and most of the tents should be dismantled. After that, Li Hongyuan asked someone to bring his precious horse over and took Jingwan to a nearby mountain at a moderate speed. Although it was not particularly high, it was enough for them to see the entire battlefield. At this moment, the battlefield was still being cleaned up. Although those people, whether they were lying on the ground or standing up to drag the corpses, were very small, like a small black dot, and the visual impact was not big, but the sensitivity of their senses seemed to have increased by a few hundred times, and a very austere and cruel aura came rushing towards them. Jingwan shivered. She didn't know if it was because of the cold or because she was affected by it. Li Hongyuan pulled Jingwan into his arms, as if he wanted to dispel the chill for Jingwan. Only when you are strong enough to make others fear you can be at peace. Jingwan understood what he was talking about, so she said, I know all about it. Then the two of them tacitly stopped talking. They hugged each other quietly and looked into the distance. That day, that mountain, that battlefield. After an unknown amount of time, Jingwan reached out and poked Li Hongyuan. Ah Yuan, you smell so bad. Hurry up and go back. Why don't you wash a few more times to wash away the smell on your body? You can sleep in another room tonight. Li Hongyuan looked down at Jingwan, whose expression of disdain was particularly obvious on her face, and laughed silently. When they went back, they did not suppress their speed, so they were very fast. Because Li Hongyuan was around, Jingwan did not need so many people to guard her. Therefore they left as many people as possible to treat the wounded. Jingwan could not help, so she could only temporarily suppress the matter in her heart. She would go to see the specific situation tomorrow and understand the casualties at the same time. However, after arriving in the northwest, the number of times the husband and wife were intimate had decreased. It should be known that during every ceremony, Li Hongyuan was mostly in control of the initiative. Now he seemed to be consciously reducing the number of times. At night, they only hugged each other to sleep. They did not do the most intimate things, but their hearts were connected in the most intimate way. The next day, Jingwan hurried to the wounded barracks, after breakfast. The wounded from yesterday should have all been relieved. As the number of wounded soldiers in the barracks increased, Jingwan felt that she should be able to do something more. Li Hongyuan did not follow this time. After this battle, it was clear that he still needed to do some things. Although the plan to deal with the West Xiongnu virtuous prince had already slowly unfolded, this kind of matter still needed a period of time to ferment. However, it did not mean that the living king of hell had nothing to do. Fu Yunting's current broken body naturally had to rely on Li Hongyuan's support. Of course, it was not to make up for his own mistakes, but merely that he did not want his plan to be dragged down by Fu Yunting. Fu Yunting, who was shot while lying down, only felt even more pain on his body when he saw Jin Qinhuang. Chapter 506. When facing the wounded again, Jingwan no longer had the indescribable emotions she had yesterday. She appeared more calm and composed. Even if she could not do anything personally, she could still comfort people at the appropriate time. It could be said that she had reached a high level of agreement with her husband on some matters. Jingwan felt that she could still do something. It was better to have psychological counseling for people who had experienced war and even been on the verge of death. However, it was obvious that Jingwan was not good at it. Perhaps she could cultivate some such people first. Although there was no systematic way to learn it, the earliest psychologists probably figured it out by themselves. She could let them complete this career in the future. Psychological counseling could not be done, but it was still possible to let these people relax in a proper way. Of course, it was not only that. She could also instill some ideas of loyalty to the country in them and at the same time, give them some chicken soup for the soul or something. Then she would carry out an unusual sympathy performance first. At present, there were only a few things that could be put on the stage for people to see. There were even fewer things that were suitable to appear here. Therefore she had to find some new tricks. Jingwan felt that she could write some positive and brainwashing picture books, and then let people change it into operas and put it on the stage. In short, she wanted to give them hope and courage, let them live well now and let them risk their lives to protect their family and country in the future. After walking around for a while, Jingwan decided to go back and write. She should be able to write a lot of this kind of thing. Jingwan was thinking as she walked. She inadvertently looked up and glanced at the entrance of the alley in front of her. Someone was looking at them, but after seeing Jingwan look over, he stepped back. He did not panic, nor was he sneaky. The distance was a little far, so Jing Dan did not see the other person's face clearly. Therefore she did not take it to heart. After all, there were many people coming and going here and there was no lack of people who secretly looked at them. Jingwan continued to walk forward. At a fork in the road, she paused and turned in another direction. The person beside her did not ask. He just followed quietly and kept to his duty. There were not many people who knew how to suture now. Even if Gong Jiu was willing to teach them, not every doctor could accept it. Compared to other people, Gong Jiu's skills were still the most pure. Therefore after the war he was also the busiest. It seemed that he had not rested since yesterday. Even if it was just the simplest suture of a wound, there were many things that needed attention. However, Jingwan did not enter Gong Jiu's operating room. If she did, she would know that Gong Jiu did not just suture. His courage and some of his ideas were very bold. Although she was a little worried about Gong Jiu's health, Jingwan just stood outside and did not go in to disturb him. Seeing that Gong Jiu hadn't come out for a long time, he didn't want to go anywhere else for a while. He only left someone to wait for Gong Jiu to come out and let him go back to rest. Not having a good rest would have a great impact on a person. Even if she knew that Gong Jiu used to be a secret guard and had undergone special training, even if he stayed up for a few days and nights, he would probably not make any mistakes. However, it did not mean that there would be no problems. Gong Jiu was only here to help because of her orders. Gong Jiu was extremely important to the prince's residence and her husband. Therefore nothing could happen to him. When she went back, she did not see Li Hongyuan. Regarding this, Jingwan was not surprised. She went directly to the study because she already had an idea. She borrowed some stories from her previous life and adapted them. Then she added things that matched the background and history of this world. She picked up the brush and started writing. Her speed was not slow. The more she wrote, the more inspiration she seemed to have. It was as if she could not stop at all. Therefore, when Li Hongyuan came back, he saw a similar scene again. This time he did not look at her quietly. Instead, he alerted Jingwan at once. Jingwan looked up at him. "You're back." Then she lowered her head and wrote more than 10 words. She stopped writing, picked up the paper and blew on it. "Ayuan, take a look. What do you think?" She handed a stack of paper to Li Hongyuan as if she was presenting a treasure. Li Hongyuan flipped open the paper while listening to Jingwan's idea. Looking at the story written on the paper in the eyes of people like Li Hongyuan, it was simply a bluff. However, if the ordinary soldiers were to read it, it would be a completely different matter. Li Hongyuan had to admit that if these things were read by the soldiers, their blood-boiling awareness would soar at least several times. After all, those people were ordinary people. They were illiterate and did not know any great principles. They were easily led by others. Wan, in the past, those in power should be very good at buying people's hearts, right? Jingwan spat softly at him. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Li Hongyuan smiled but did not say anything. The topic ended there. "Hurry up and write a letter to the capital. Ask the prince's opera troupe to come over." "There are opera troupes in the capital as well. Why do you want to go to the farthest place?" "Because I want to watch a play and listen to music. The opera troupe here can't meet my requirements." "What's wrong with that?" Li Hongyuan smiled ambiguously. In an instant Jingwan understood. TSK. That was why this man was able to make use of everything reasonably. "You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.